what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. It's July 8th, 2025. The summer keeps heating up. It's gonna be a hot summer. Don't go downtown. It's gonna be smoggy. No? Hi. What's going on, everybody? Hello. I'm your host for this week's show. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. And it's time to talk about video games. It's beyond time. I mean, let's be honest. We've been overdue for this conversation for quite a while. Your mother and I have decided that we're going to allow you to play 1 hour of video games a day. That's right. Yep. I hope you use them wisely. And you can do that in the afternoon. Get outside and play. Go outside. The water table's full. Go out there and splash around. I don't know. Go splash. Go splash and play. Hi everybody. As the summer wears on, the kids have gotten back into video games. Actually, it's been interesting. I finally. Well, I don't. We have been playing We Love Katamari Reroll Plus Royal Reverie here in the home, and that's been going over really well because it's ridiculous, and so you get to a level where it's just like now you're rolling a sumo guy around, and he needs to eat a bunch of food to get bigger, and all of that, and so it's been great fun playing that with the kids, though my son just he says, I want to play We Love Katamari, and then I say, okay, all right buddy, let's do it. And I turned it on and he just goes, I want you to play. And so I am playing about half of We Love Katamari, which is great because it's a great game. I think it's on some version of the PlayStation tiered setup. It may also be on Game Pass, I'm not sure. And so we've been playing it on PlayStation, and he's okay with the controller, but he doesn't win the levels. And so the thing I realized about the Katamari games is that they're fucking scary sometimes. Because when you lose the level, the King of All Cosmos is not chill about it. The King of All Cosmos shoots eye lasers at your character for like 40 seconds and says things he's very cross with you. And so my son does not like to get the eye lasers shot at him. And so after he lost a couple of levels, he went, and I ended up, I am playing quite a bit of it. And just, yeah, I don't know, he can't read yet. My daughter is quite a good reader these days, but also like the menu in that game of you like walking around, it's a menu where you're kind of like walking up and talking to people, and you see kind of their characters holding their hands up, and you can walk up to them and start the level. But like even that menu is not super easy to navigate. So like once it's in game, they can understand like tank controls of like, okay, steer with the stick and do this. And they're not amazing with it, but like they're doing fine. They're having fun. But everything outside of that is definitely like you have to be there. You kind of have to be there to navigate things. Or yeah, even the quick menu is still like button presses away and pulling that out and doing that. Like there's the menu and the eye lasers end up being the most difficult portions of We Love Katamari, but that's been a lot of fun to play with them, and they've had a really good time with that. But yeah, I don't know. I always assume there is some endless mode somewhere. I don't know if you have to unlock it or if it's just in there somewhere, but that's always there are a couple of levels there where it's like, just roll around until you get 100 of these things. And that's much better than the timed levels, because the timed levels, they freak out and they lose and all that other stuff. So, but it's been really fun, though it's hard to answer questions about it sometimes. Like, who's that? It's like, well, that's the King of All Cosmos. What does he do? Well, well, all right. So he's gonna say a bunch of nonsense, and then we're the prince, or I think we changed. Well, now we're a guy named Macho because you unlock other characters, and while he's telling Macho to go roll around, to go roll up a bunch of tires because he needs tires, and we're gonna make a tire planet. And my son gets very excited when the Katamari gets turned into a planet, and the kids are competitive, and I don't love that, to be honest. My daughter picked it up from school last year where she just like everything is a race up the stairs, everything is a like all of that stuff, and so there's very much like, whose planet is this? Is it mine or is it his? Who got this? This is my planet. Then the next one is his planet. And I'm like, okay, which one's bigger? Like, well, it doesn't really matter. It's like, okay, this one's made of tires. I mean, they both won. We won the level. It's not. And so that's been. I don't know, that's been interesting across a lot of different things, really, over the last few months. But it's like the working competitive stuff into Katamari has been a little weird. It does have a 2-player mode. I should dig out another controller and see what the 2-player mode is like in Katamari. That might be something that they might have more fun with. Or it might just be like even more competitive and weirder and all of that other stuff. So I'll have to take a look at that. I feel like there are just a few types of games that I need to play on my own to check and see like, oh, is this going to be good for them? Is this going to, because it's a very different lens than I think, when you're normally playing video games, to go like, okay, knowing what I know about their ability to absorb instruction, which is not great. Their ability to listen, not awesome. No, they're well, I don't know. They're great at focusing on video games. They're not so good at listening to yours truly. Boy, that's fun. But yeah, no, it's been interesting kind of going through that and finding another game that they're like super into. If they got into raising horses, well, my daughter just went and rode a horse for the first time last week, and I think she is in danger of becoming a horse girl. I think she is. She was very excited about it, and I think she is on track. Unless something derails it, I think she's on the road. To horses. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's been a lot of fun. And then of course Tony Hawk has been introduced into the equation as well, and that actually ended up being not too bad for. Well, my daughter hasn't seen it yet because she was off at farm camp. But my son played some Tony Hawk yesterday, and he's not going to be able to do tricks or anything like that, but he can skate around and jump, and he's been like super digging it. So I have been digging it as well. Why don't we take a break? We'll come back. We'll talk about young Tony, the world's youngest skateboarder, when we get back. Whether you sweat a little bit or a lot, it's unpleasant, especially, this time of year, the heat, the humidity, all of that stuff. He's just walking around just drenched. And that's gross. But there's a solution. Mando has something out there that takes sweat control to the next level. That's right, introducing the Mando Deodorant Plus Sweat Control Solid Stick. It's double protection. Finally, you can get the odor protection you love with Mando, plus powerful sweat control. Head over to shopmando.com and experience the double protection of Mando Deodorant Plus Sweat Control. They sent some of this over. They got a nice variety of scents at their disposal. There's also an unscented. If you're not a smell guy. If you're like, I don't want to smell like something else, I just want to smell like nothing. Mando has your back. That's what I like. I like the nice variety about that, also, all that stuff. But also, hey, they're delivering clinical strength sweat control. One swipe, you're good to go. It's not your typical deodorant. That clinical strength, it means it's 2 times better at controlling sweat than the standard, and it controls both sweat and odor for 72 hours. After just 12 hours, underarm sweat was reduced by 92%. That's a big number. That's just leaving you with what? Let me do some math. 8% of sweat. Not bad. Not bad. And it doesn't just mask odor, it prevents it. 100% of study participants experienced all-day odor protection. They've got premium ingredients. It's not loaded down with chemicals. They've got some gentle mandelic acid in there for you to keep you fresh and to keep you dry. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like a mini body wash or deodorant wipes, and free shipping. And as a special offer for you, you can get 20% off site-wide with the code JeffG. Use the code JeffG at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide and free shipping. shopmando.com. Support the show. Let them know that we sent you. Mando's got you covered. With deodorant plus sweat control, say goodbye to sweat stains and hello to long-lasting freshness. Tony Hawk. You love him. You see him places and you say, that looks like that guy. He's back. He has brought with him a cavalcade of skateboarders, new and old, with the release of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4, which is out now if you spent the money to play it now. That is, what is that? So that's the expensive version, the digital deluxe edition, which comes with, what is that? Some clothes for custom skaters, some skate decks for custom skaters, 2 characters from Doom, the Doom Slayer and the Revenant, to be exact. Some additional music from Doom, including a couple from Mick Gordon that I was like, oh, that's weird. You know, it's weird to see his name alongside some of the other stuff. And you can play it now instead, and a wireframe Tony Hawk shader that actually I thought that could look kind of cool, But yes, you if you get that version of the game, you can play it now. That version is $70 on Steam. The normal version of the game on Steam is $50. Of course, it will also be on Game Pass later this week. For those of you who are subscribed to that thing. I'm really enjoying it. This is I talked quite a bit about it when I played it during Summer Game Fest. And this is that game still. It's I am but that build, everything was unlocked, and so I'm going through the unlocking process and kind of seeing how that works. And they've changed little bits and pieces of it from the previous game, where the previous game you were like gaining levels and stuff as you went, and there was an XP concept, and like they've done away with a lot of that in favor of just like, hey, there are goals associated with the Tony Hawk 3 campaign. There are goals associated with the Tony Hawk 4 campaign. There are pro goals and other stuff that you'll unlock later. There are goals associated with, things you do as a created skater or whatever. And those will be things that you will use to unlock packs of clothing and whatever else. And that's been, it's very lightly streamlined. It's basically the same system. It's not dramatically different, but it is kind of like one fewer step in some cases that I think is kind of an improvement. Though it is sometimes nice to just have like, hey, sometimes you're like, oh, look at this. I got I'm level 80 or whatever. And so, not having that there, I guess is something, but, it's great to go back to some of these levels. They play largely as you would expect them to play. I have mostly been spending my time with the Tony Hawk 3 levels, but I kind of got in. So I've been playing it on PlayStation 5. And then when it unlocked on PC, I started playing the PC version of it a little bit last night. I started playing the 4 levels there, which seems like a dumb way to split my time, but I'll probably mostly play on PlayStation because I already have made a bunch of progress there. And some of it just looks really, really great. Like if you've seen the Foundry demo, then you kind of know what I'm talking about, because the Foundry, I think, is really striking in some ways. Like there's just fire belching out of everywhere. Like it's just there's just the level just looks so much more dynamic and alive and stuff. It's kind of crazy to see. Everything really pops, and it's just a nice looking video game. It does the outdoor level, like the levels that are a little bit less fantastical. Obviously, you kind of get into the Tony Hawk 4 levels, and you get a little more grounded, I suppose, with college and and such. And I think those look really nice as well. And so, like, overall, it's a really good looking game. Great animation, like all the stuff that you kind of expect. I think the gameplay is where you want it to be. There's a couple of minor things that seem to have changed. So, okay. Foundry in Tony Hawk 3. It's the very first level in Tony Hawk 3. There is a goal where there is a big molten lava bucket it comes out, it beeps, it turns, and it dumps a bunch of lava out. When it turns, there are a couple of rails on the side of it. Your goal is to just grind one of those rails, and that makes the bucket fall, and oh shit, and whatever. I would always that was always like an incredibly easy, just like whatever, kind of whatever goal of like, I stand on the high ground and I just kind of hit that little ramp there up and get it. And it's just like boom, boom. Here, I'm not getting the air off of that I feel like I used to. And so I have to go from the low ground up because there's more of a ramp up. And that almost seems like that's probably the way you're supposed to have always done it, is to start down there and go up and hit it. And you can do that just fine. It's super easy. It's not like, but like it just was a weird thing of like, I'm not catching as much air off of this as it seems like I used to. And that's a little weird. Ultimately, a really minor thing, but it was, like if we're, these things exist for you to pick them apart and compare them to the original version of the game, right? And so that's something that stood out as like, weird. A stat thing? No, because I was able to catch much more air off that lower ramp and get way up there. And it would always be the first level in Tony Hawk 3 anyway, and so you're always kind of skating it with low stats, no matter what. And I thought that was interesting, but yeah, I that is the kind of the only thing I've really noticed. They've changed some of the layouts in terms of skill point collective, like when you're collecting skill points, because you're collecting them across 2 whole campaigns. Some of that stuff has changed as they've kind of stretched it out a little bit. So you don't just hit max stats immediately. Like it's, otherwise you would just get all those stat points and just go. Let's see. But yeah, I pretty much like Tokyo looks fantastic. The ramps light up when you touch them, and like there's just a bunch of cool effects and fun stuff that they did to just kind of make the game look cool. Like it's just, I don't know. They did a really good job of kind of bringing these levels to life all over again. And I really appreciate that aspect of it. I think just like visually, it's just like, man, it's just fucking crazy. Because when Tony Hawk 3 came out, it was a mind-blowing video game to look at, because you had just been looking at Tony Hawk 1 and 2 in the previous years, and here you go, full frame rate, like smooth. You go look at those ramps in Tokyo; they are extremely fucking curved. They're not jagged polygons. Like it's really, like that game was amazing to see back then, and so it's nice to see. Just, I don't know, just like an extreme level of detail and polish or whatever taken to this that I think just looks really great. And also still looks like how you remember it. I'm not going to say that this is the new benchmark for video game graphics or whatever, right? But I do think that, like it was a very impressive looking game back in its day. And I think that it, like they've stayed true to that. They've done really nice work here, just kind of visually and thematically and all of that. I think that, that ultimately I think the big standout changes that people are latching onto right now that you see kind of being the discussion points are the changes to the way Tony Hawk 4 is done. Which we've discussed, ultimately I actually I kind of dig it. The way that they've changed Tony Hawk 4 is instead of it being more like a Grand Theft Auto, skate up to a mission giver, hit a button, and then that starts the mission that you're in, like collect these letters or, do this or get that, like it's very much, it is done in the more kind of 1, 2, and 3 format of you load it up and it is, you are given a 2-minute timer and you go around and do the goals. And then there are pro goals that will unlock later to kind of give you more of those goals to do on another run down the line, kind of after you kind of complete stuff. And I don't know, I think it works. I as someone who liked 4 just fine, but felt that it maybe wasn't as interesting as 3, the changes they made to 3, I thought were, landmark, huge moments. The changes they made in 4, much more minor, I felt, in terms of just gameplay stuff. Like the spine transfer is cool. It is not the revert. Let's not beat around the bush here, goddammit. And then the level design stuff, like, that to me was not like that's not something I'm like dying to go revisit. And so, yeah, it's different. And if you really, really like 4, then I think that you'll be bummed out by some of that stuff to an extent, but whatever. I think I honestly prefer it a little bit. Because it kind of it makes it feel like slightly different, and it kind of has you approach those levels from a slightly different perspective of like, oh, what can I get done in 2 minutes? And like, oh, I can knock out like 4 goals here and then come back and do this. And the more leisurely pace of like skate up to mission giver, start mission, do mission, that they did in the original game. It's a very different thing. And I don't know, like I'm torn a little bit because it is different, right? And I'm like, when you look at these things, you go like, oh, we're bringing these games back, and like, okay, well, yeah, you kind of crammed these levels into a format here for what I assume are going to be development reasons. And talking to them about it, they were like, hey, it was a little weird, because 3 is like this and because 1 and 2 were like this, like it's a little weird to have kind of 2 completely different things in the same game, and so it made sense that way. I would not be shocked if there were also just like technical reasons why it would be easier from a development perspective to not do all of that, plus all the VO and all the other stuff that kind of comes with that and what they want to change and whatever. So I'm sure that there are probably a handful of reasons why that move made sense for them. Ultimately I look at it as kind of a toss up. Like I don't think it necessarily makes the game dramatically better, but I also don't think it makes the game extremely worse. So I'll take it. I'm totally okay with that. They also developed some new levels that fit into the Tony Hawk 4 structure. There are 3 new levels in the game. There's a movie studio that is a new competition level, and I think that's a really good level. It kind of reminds me of Aggressive Inline a little bit. There is a water park level that I think is really, really well done. It fits in great, and it has its own goals and all this other stuff. And then there's a level called Pinball that I think is the unlock after you beat the campaign pinball unlocks. I'm not sure exactly how you unlock pinball in the final product, but it is you skating inside of a pinball machine, and that's fucking neat. Those 3 levels, the new levels that they made for this game are good enough that I really want them to take this team, the Iron Galaxy, the studio that did this. They did the PC version of 1 and 2. They did that port, but this is all them, because Vicarious became Blizzard Albany or whatever, and all the shit that happened back then. They should be making I have changed from now they need to remake Thug to now they need to make a brand new Tony Hawk game, because those 3 levels are good enough, are strong enough, with good enough goals. Because that's always like, you can make the geometry and make a cool level, but if the goals are shit, then it's like, it kind of falls apart. But I think that they have done a really good job with the levels that they made from scratch for this game. And I think that the next thing I would like to see out of the Tony Hawk franchise would be a brand new game. If they're going to get the people that made those levels to make those levels, because obviously, if they said we're making a brand new game, but someone else is doing it, or whatever, like, then kind of all bets are off all over again. But I think that those 3 levels are strong enough that if you took that team and said, okay, now do it for real, and make a brand new thing, I think that would be fucking cool. I think that they could do it. And redeem the city of Chicago when it comes to making Tony Hawk games. The soundtrack is quite a bit different. I hadn't done the math on it. VideoGamesChronicle.com did, and have a headline: less than 20% of this Tony Hawk 3 and 4 soundtrack is made up of songs from the original games. In some cases, the deck on it is. It contains just 10 songs from the original 2 games compared to 54 new tracks, according to VGC analysis. I like the idea of that counting songs on a soundtrack is now analysis. This is the important, whatever. This is the important shit. This is the analysis that actually matters. But yeah, it's a pretty different soundtrack. There are some cases where you've got songs from artists that were in the game previously, but it's like a different song, and so it's got it doesn't have TNT, but it has an AC. There is an AC/DC song in it, right? I'm like, anyway, there's. Sorry, there are changes. I went through and turned off a bunch of songs. I went through and turned off about 20 songs from, just like, it's like, this is a little too hard for this, or like, look, man, it's maybe, as far as I'm concerned, it's maybe his one good song, but I just don't fucking like Lupe Fiasco. I think that dude fucking sucks. I don't want to hear fucking Kick Push, even though that is the one good Lupe Fiasco song. So I turned it off, and I turned off a bunch of other songs. I turned off Run the Jewels, because fuck Run the Jewels. There's a few ska tracks on there. Like it's a lot of, Idols is on there, which is kind of cool. Waves is on there. The OCs is on there. Like there are some fucking, good bands. Like 100 Gex is on there. It's a great fit. There's some fucking fantastic stuff in this game, but it is not the stuff that you are necessarily like. 96 Quite Bitter Beings is in there, but it is the re-record of it. It is not the original version of CKY's 96 Quite Bitter Beings. They have since, for a record company, the way the shitty music industry works, they have re-recorded it, and so that re-record is in there, and it's fine. But I don't. It's not the same. And so I don't know, that stuck out to me a little bit. Motorhead's in there. So, I think there's enough here for me between like the right old songs are there. And enough of the new stuff is good enough that it's like this all still works, but also there's a bunch of music on here. And so, I turned off a bunch of it, and there was still a lot of it turned on. And so that was kind of cool. I guess, like, point being, when Alien Ant Farm said that they were bummed out that their song was not in the game, and I was like, yeah, but also fuck Alien Ant Farm. It doesn't stick out as missing, I guess I'll say. But again, that's going to be one of those, music, obviously more so than just about anything else, I think is going to be one of those personal taste sort of things. So if you're a fucking Alien or Ant Farm fan, look, if you're an Alien Ant Farm fan, you've got bigger issues than, is this song inside of fucking Tony Hawk 3 and 4 or not, okay? Look, let's be real about it. Okay. It's got multiplayer. I have not played a ton of it, but the people that the couple of multiplayer matches I got into were with the sort of people that you might expect to still be playing Tony Hawk on the internet after all these years, and they are not to be fucked with. So, I was able to place second and third in a couple of those, but look, maybe it's different now, maybe it'll be different as of Friday when the game's out for a lot more people, but like the people playing it right now are just fucking killers. It's just like, all right, let's go in here and do a little combo mambo. Oh shit, they just dropped like a fucking 3 million. Okay, well, fuck this. But it's still been fun. You can maybe team up with your friends. It actually has like a pretty robust like party system and pull out menu for like, because it's cross-play, so it's like it ties into your Activision friends ID or whatever, the same one you may have already made for Call of Duty or whatever. And so that, you can pull together a party and go play stuff, and it actually, like, it was actually pretty well done from what I was seeing in there, as just like, hey, here's an easy way to get your friends together and play if you want to do that too, in terms of like forming a party, joining a game, like all that sort of stuff. Like, that was kind of neat to see. Hopefully it stays working. That was one of my big problems with Tony Hawk 1 and 2, is that half of the versions that got released, the online just died at a certain point. And I think, I haven't gone back and checked, but like the PlayStation version completely stopped working for me online. The Epic Store version completely stopped working. The Steam version, which shipped later because it was an Epic exclusive, the Steam version worked online when it shipped. And as far as I know, that version still works. But that might be the only working version of that game. And it was never acknowledged or like, hey, this is broken and we're fixing it. It was just like, like, what's happening here? And that was fucking weird. I don't know. Maybe it was like a Call of Duty World War. Did you hear about this Call of Duty? Hey, you hear about this Call of Duty World War II? You hear about this World War II they're doing? I guess they pulled the PC version of Call of Duty World War II off of Game Pass because it has an RCE. Like, there are hot exploits up in it. And so people were playing it, and then suddenly Notepad was opening on their machine, and people were talking shit to them or kicking them out of games, and like, weird. Every Call of Duty game gets hacked eventually, but like if you go back and play like the Xbox 360 version of like maybe like Modern Warfare 2, the original one, or even Black Ops or some of those games, like, the only people playing those games online anymore are people that are online with modded consoles. They've turned on stealth to make sure they can't be banned from Xbox Live or whatever the fuck is going on. And so there were all these situations back in the day where you could join a server, and this is on console. This is on, you would join a server and be like, what's happening here? There's like a zillion AI guys in here. There's like zombies. Like, they had built their own weird zombies modes out of like modded lobbies, or it would be situations where like you could join a modded lobby, shoot one enemy, and it would bring you all the way up to prestige 10. But also sometimes if you randomly joined the wrong lobby, you would shoot a guy and it would like subtract all of your XP, lock all your, like, it would basically like subtract you all the way down to level 1. You just fucked shit. You're just like, what the fuck? Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, that is still the case on a lot of those games. If you want to see some shit, go try to play some of those Xbox versions of those Call of Duty games, because they're just fucking weird. But like on PC, it's obviously like a very different story. PC is a very different attack surface, and there are some way crazier things that can happen. And so they've pulled. They didn't acknowledge that that's why they pulled it. They just said like, "There's been an issue." Like, yeah, shit. And so maybe it will make it back up. Maybe they'll fix it finally now that it's kind of been, showing up and getting some traction, because the modded lobbies for console versions of Call of Duty, like, who cares? After all these years, like, people want to have fun, do some weird shit. Like, sure, do it. They should. The Xbox 360, Xbox Live is a wild west of hacking and weird shit, because they're not updating. There's no new games coming out for 360. And so they're not updating any of the security rings on any of the discs or any, like it's just, it's whatever, right? And so it's a shame if you want to go back and play like unfettered Call of Duty on an Xbox 360, I guess, or even an Xbox One, because you can, if you can backwards compatible your way into a lot, or even, I guess, a current Xbox. But like, people are doing wild stuff there, and sometimes that's interesting to see. If you want to take a trip down memory lane, I would say load that up someday and just kind of see what's there. See what you find. You might find a normal lobby, I don't know. But in my experience, every time I load up one of those kind of, let's say, late 2000s, early 2010s Xbox 360 Call of Duties, it's just fucking wild. And I think even the PlayStation versions are also probably all crazy now too, because I mean, PS3 custom firmware has been a thing. PS3 custom stuff is probably way easier to do than 360 at this point. I just don't know who's getting banned or how stringent they are with banning accounts and whatever else. So I don't know what the actual situation is there, but that's probably also happening on the PlayStation. Anyway, in conclusion, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, I am really, really liking it. It is basically what I was looking for. I think if you stare at it long enough, you'll find 2 or 3 things that you go like, I wish that maybe this was more like this, or this was different here, or what have you. And returning to some of those levels, like, not all of them are awesome. Or not all of them are maybe as awesome as you remember, like Skater Island. I don't know that I think that Skater Island is a great level in Tony Hawk 3 anymore. As much as I loved all those levels back then, that's maybe one of the ones that stood out as just like, it's okay, but not one of my favorites for sure. But yeah, it is great to have this game at all. I mean, to be honest, for a thing that seemed like it was, getting killed in an era when Microsoft seems increasingly unable to make fucking video games in the first place, I guess. It's nice to have a little Tony Hawk back in your life. And one is left to wonder, will it ever happen again, considering all of the other shit that's been going down. What else, man? I had to replace This is a lot like the pity systems in these loot games, which some people wrote in after we talked about it last week. Some people wrote in to defend, which of course they would. People wrote in to say, no, these pity systems are good. They help you get the item you're looking for. And it's like, no, you need to back up like 6 steps. Like, yes, in the prison we've constructed, the pity system is better than not having the pity system. But the problem is the cage you're already in, son. Like you are missing the point of this discussion if you are leaving YouTube comments saying, no, these pity systems are great. On a similar note, I replaced the joystick modules on my DualSense Edge. You can order these directly from Sony. They are, I believe, $20 a pop, so $40 for a set. And so I was getting a little bit of drift in one of these ones, and so I said, well, I guess I should order replacements. And one of the really nice things about the DualSense Edge is that you can just pop the case off. There's a little thing to kind of unclip these stick modules. There's a little, connector port at the top. They slide right out. You slide the new ones back in. You clamp them down. You put the plastic case over the top. You got brand new sticks. Isn't that awesome? However, this controller is like $200. Why do I have to fucking do this in the first place? This is ridiculous. Are you kidding me? For the amount of money, how much is the DualSense Edge? It is inexpensive, much like the Xbox Elite controller. It is, yes, $199. It's a great controller. I think it's fantastic. I have been using a DualSense Edge on my PC for a good long time now, and it has become my favorite controller. So for the $200, I will say I like it a lot more than a lot of these other controllers I have been using over the years. Is it $200 better compared to some of these 8-bit, some of these other controllers that are like this $80, $60, whatever? I don't know. You know, like the Ghoulie Kit KK3 Max looks real good. I got a KK2 Max, and it's a nice fucking controller. And you know what that controller has that the DualSense Edge doesn't? Fucking Hall effect sticks that are not going to do this shit. This fucking 8-bit dough that I'm going to pull up here and it's going to make a bunch of beeping noises because Windows, this thing has TMR sticks in it. And it is not $200. The idea that we are still dealing with like this ancient stick technology, this caveman-ass controller tech, and that even Nintendo spent all their time dealing with stick drift issues with the Switch 1. When it came time for the Switch 2 to come out, what did they do? Every single person has, do you have Hall effect sticks in this one, or these TMRs? What do you? And they're like, the controllers are good. These are very nice controllers. These are great controllers. These are good controllers. The Joy-Cons are fantastic. And then people get a hold of them, tear them apart. They go, oh, no, these are pretty much the same fucking thing. You've put like a little bit more effort into maybe making them not drift as much, but like we'll see how it goes over time. Ridiculous. It's just ridiculous that this is still the thing. Because those stick modules, hey, when you're dealing with the economies of scale, I'm sure that putting fancier sticks into your controllers, that adds up, right? But in a world where the price of controllers is already fucked, where a Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller is $90 fucking after tax. What the fuck are we doing? And so I say, this was really cool. It's really neat. And these are fun to hold and fuck around with. The old ones, I'm like, ooh, look at this. These stick modules for this DualSense Edge. It's so cool that I can take these out and put new ones in. I can fix it on my own and the controller lasts longer. I shouldn't have to do this in the first place. It's great that they spent a bunch of time engineering a solution that lets you swap these out. You shouldn't have to. In this day and age, we should not have to. And yes, it's new technology, so it might not be available at the scale that some of these controller needs. I'm sure there's manufacturing concerns that end up being potentially an issue here. When it comes to, a major first party coming in and saying, like, we need 8 trillion of these because we're going to make a lot of controllers over the next decade. Maybe that's hard. Maybe that's hard. In fact, I'm sure that's probably hard. However, come on. I'm going to dip my stick modules in it. Frustrating. So you can actually buy, people have made third-party replacement modules for the DualSense Edge that you can get TMR sticks that you can put in a DualSense Edge controller, and it sounds like that they fit into this same case that these other ones do. They are modified original stick modules. And so I'm thinking about taking a chance on those. However, the problem comes down to calibration. Apparently, if you want to swap out your sticks on a base level DualSense controller, that's like a done deal, pretty easy to do. You might have to solder some shit, so that's, I don't know, that's spooky to me. On the DualSense Edge, however, they are not able to calibrate the controllers the same way. And so they can't calibrate the sticks the same way. And so what you're buying is something that, whoever is making these shady TMR DualSense Edge modules has calibrated it for you, and they're like, But everything when you go look and find, hey, I want to buy some replacement stick modules or whatever, like there's something about the way that these sticks calibrate when you plug them into a DualSense Edge that you cannot calibrate the TMRs the same way, and that there's some sort of issue there with the self-calibration whatever it is. And so that is kind of the thing that stops you from just like getting a bunch of weird third-party stuff and plugging it in there is because of the way that stuff works. But I did see someone selling, and they're like, hey, it might take you a few weeks, because when you go to Sony's website to buy the stick modules, they will let you buy 2. And I guess maybe you could probably place another order for another 2 later. but you can't just buy like 100 of them. And so if you're modifying these things for resale, it's probably pretty hard to come by a grip of them. And so when you look at the websites that are selling them, they're fucking ridiculous. They're shit. You know, it's like the same way that like when dudes were modding Xbox 360 controllers in you know, before Scuff became a corporate brand or whatever, when it was like, hey, it's going to take a little while because I got to go buy one of these from Target. And then I got to fucking, I don't know, put weird metal things around back that touch the buttons up here and, you know, whatever the fuck they're doing. Like it's like that. It feels like that when you look at some of the websites that are selling these things. Because there are other places like you can see like you know, AliExpress and some of this places that are selling modules for the regular DualSense, but like last time I looked, they did not have anything for the Edge because of that calibration issue. So hopefully that's something that gets figured out. I would like to just replace these one more time and never have to do it unless it's a, you know, a physical failure, like a rubber failure. Call your doctor. Or something to that effect. But yeah, I don't know. I might actually pay $80 to buy these weird shady TMR stick modules just to see what it's like. That's expensive. That's like it's $40 a module. You need 2 of them. $80, I could just buy a whole new different controller. But I like this controller. Oh my God. I like this controller. It's a good thing I like this controller because it was $200 freaking dollars. So it's good that it's good, because otherwise, man, that'd be a real fucking bummer. Let's take one more break. We'll come back. We'll talk about Feet. Finally, a podcast about Feet. Some things come into your life at just the right time. That's how it worked with me and Chubbies. Chubbies sent out a pair of their classic lined swim trunks. And, you know, it's been hot. We've been, you know, going places with the kids, doing some swimming. And, I've been getting horribly sunburned, but that's neither here nor there. But I got hooked up with these Chubbies. I wore these Chubbies to the pool. I wore these Chubbies to the beach. And they've got a built-in liner that is extra comfortable. Sometimes, because you're getting in and out of the water. You know, you got kids that are, you know, they're getting out running away. They want pool toys. They need a drink, something like, you know, so, and every time you get in and out of the water, like your shorts usually they adjust, they end up in the wrong places. They're halfway up your crack, and it's a nightmare. Chubbies stays put. Chubbies ain't messing around. It's a nice pair of swim trunks. They've got a variety of shorts wear and so on. They've got these original stretch shorts that are real nice. They're comfy, they're casual, and they're built for life. The Chubbies original stretch shorts can just live on your legs. Available in long, short, and extremely short if you're into those small inseams. They've got a relaxed fit, elastic waistband, no fuss design. These are the kind of shorts that, you know, you just throw them on and just live, baby. You can get a 20% off right now. Use this code Jeff at chubbiesshorts.com. Let the thighs out and let the good times roll. Whether you're suiting up for cannonballs, cookouts, or casual Fridays, Chubbies has you covered. For a limited time, Chubbies is giving you 20% off your order with the code Jeff at chubbiesshorts.com. That's code Jeff at chubbiesshorts.com. Support the show. Let them know we sent you. Summer's here. Get a pair of shorts dressed like it in Chubbies. Chubbies. I found myself back into the first Descendant a little bit here. With some of the new stuff that they've added to it, I kind of got back into the game a little bit and have been playing some of the new mode. They added a Paragon level kind of thing, sort of like Diablo has, that I have maxed out with one character, and some kind of new stuff to that effect. And so I found myself watching They ran a live stream because they just had their 1 year anniversary. Can you believe it? The Last Descendant has been the first. Hang on. The first Descendant has been around for a full year. Boy, how time flies. So they put on a live stream. This thing was like 5 fucking hours. It was like crazy how long this was because they spent a bunch of time going like, and here's the user. Like it was, it was like fan focused, I guess. And it was like, here's the user who's revived the most players. Please contact customer support. We'd like to give you a little something for reviving the most players or whatever. And they kind of walked through a bunch of percentage charts about like, here's the guns that are being used. And here's the ladies that are being used. And here's this is, yes, it definitely sounds like a sting. Like, we just want to talk. Just come on down to the station. We want to give you an award for how good you are at the ass game. So they're rolling out new content, I think in August, like it's a month out or something. And so they're doing countdowns to whenever that starts, and there's new characters and new playable characters, I guess, and some other stuff that they're looking to add and rebalance and all the stuff that people have been wanting them to do with that game for a while. I guess I didn't realize, just how, I talked about it a little bit last week when I loaded up Wordle to chat in that game, and it was just a bunch of people talking about ass, and I was like, oh yeah. I mean, I guess that's the game. I mean, I guess that's what this game is. It makes sense that that's all anyone would talk about, in this game. But they started going over some of the new features that they're rolling out for the new season, and it made me finally realize, like, oh, this is the game I'm playing. Like, this is what this game is. Everyone acknowledges that this is 100% what this game is, and they are going to do more of it. It's not just like, hey, summer is here, so we made some new swimsuits for the ladies. It's like, oh, they're taking it to another level. They are adding a lounge area that you can go to, and as they're describing this, I should find the live stream and pull it up, because they're like, and when you get to the lounge area, the girls will make eye contact with you and talk to you. That was the first thing they said about it. Was like, they'll make eye contact. It's like, what? Wait, what are you? What have I gotten myself into? It's like you suddenly look around the room and it's like, I gotta go. What the? It's like, oh, it's too late now. The doors are locked. And also, and then like they pan out and the girl is barefoot, and they're like, it's taken us a lot of work. We had to spend a long time on it. It was a real labor of like a passion project. But yes, you will be able to see their feet. And they're going to do a whole new class of cosmetics for, like, you can decorate this room. It's like a player housing kind of thing. But they're just like, and here she is in the bathroom. And they said bathroom was a translation issue. Really, it was like she's like sitting on the edge of a bed, kicking her feet around in a very noticeable way. And it's just like, oh shit, what have I done? Yeah, I don't know. Apparently I'm into the feet guy game. It was one thing where you could turn up the physics and make the asses bounce and make the boobs jiggle. I was like, well, I think this is ridiculous. I think that you people should just go watch actual pornography. But all right, your bouncy ass game. And I'm sitting there watching, and they're like, check out these feet. By the way, Nier Automata partnership skins coming soon. We're like, oh, so I can see 2B's feet. All right, well now I'm on fucking board. So yeah, I got back into that, man. I don't that game, I think, scratches a very similar itch to like a Phantasy Star Online 2. Outriders has been in the news a little bit later. They kind of came up in a couple of discussions lately, and I reinstalled Outriders and played a little bit of that. And I was like, oh yeah, Outriders, this is cool. And then as I started playing it, I was like, man, this is just like, it's like the first Descendant, but too slow. Like I need to go back to the real thing. This fucking guy is not going to show feet. What the fuck am I doing? I'm wasting my goddamn time. And I don't know, that this is the situation I found myself in. So yeah, I don't know. It's again like a crazy long live stream where like they rented out, like they seem to have like put together like a big stage with screens behind them. I think I talked about this on the Wednesday show a little bit. With all these big screens behind them, but yet when it came time for them to show trailers or anything else, they didn't just take the trailer full screen directly. Instead, they had a camera. So it's like a camera pointed at a screen showing a girl in like, you know, bedroom negligee kind of thing with feet out. And she's just hanging out showing feet. And I'm like, huh? Yeah. Okay. Okay, man. But like there's, you know, the shooting itself, the abilities, the way they interact with some of the characters. I think some of the characters are not very fun to play. But some of the characters are fun. Like some of those, the more direct kind of skill-based characters and stuff, like there's a fucking video game underneath all those feet and boobs and stuff. I think that's maybe the frustrating part, is that it's like realizing that like, oh, the only reason anyone's playing this is because they're just fucking true deal sickos, just full fucking on. And here I am going like, I guess I'm fucking down with these people now. I guess we're fucking high-fiving at the fucking foot trough. Like, what do we do? God, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And I don't know. That game's a very specific type of slop. We were talking about games with pity systems and all that other stuff. And, you know, that game is a very specific type of prison. And it's a prison that I've been reporting to, not quite on a nightly basis, but close enough for another week and like the last week and a half of just going like, all right, I'm gonna get in here and, well, if I go run my dailies, then I'll get more RK tuning points and then I can level this up and get here and wow, I'm so much more powerful now. Like this game was already easy and now it's somehow even easier. And it got feet. So yeah, I don't know, man. You can check that out. If you like feet, coladas. Is that a thing? I don't know. It is now. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's just something about the way that game moves and the way that game shoots that I think that, you know, the loot could be better for that sort of thing. Like pretty much everything you're picking up is garbage unless you're highly specifically, you know, looking for a specific type of item for a specific type of character, and then it's frustrating in an entirely different way. And research timers that you can pay real money to bring down, like, you know, every single type of fucking like poke you for money type thing they're doing. That's the game, right? And it's a shame because I think like that game's gameplay is better than some, like I think it is better than Outriders in terms of just like the moment to moment combat and stuff. It is similar in a lot of ways, but it is faster, it's snappier. Like you're just like there's something to it, and that's the most frustrating thing. Is you're just like, I keep coming back to this fucking jail cell, lock me the fuck in it so that I can fucking shoot ice or fucking toxic goo on the ground and fuck people up, and my reward for this is feet. And my reward for this is feet. Let's get into the news. Last week, we talked about what was likely to happen when Microsoft laid off a number of people. We kind of knew last Tuesday, thanks to reporting from Jason Schreier and some other folks out there, that there were, that there were layoffs right around the corner. And so I spent some time talking about, educated guesses on how that might look and what that might look like. And That is basically how a lot of it went. There were some unannounced projects that kind of got wrapped up in this. That we've heard about some of them, but probably not others. Maybe we will still hear more about it, but these are widespread layoffs across all of Microsoft. This is something that touched plenty of parts of the company that are not related to video games. But it is something that's, I think they said, under half of the 9,000-ish layoffs were going to touch the game group. We've since seen reports. This all happened on Wednesday, so it was the day after the podcast. But we have since gotten a lot of details about different teams that have been touched by these layoffs. It seems like it really went across the board with some studios in the Call of Duty machine, like Sledgehammer, and Raven, and High Moon, just like some of those studios getting seeing some cuts. We have had entire projects get cut. Probably the biggest, highest profile of those is Perfect Dark, which just to recap, because again, we didn't really talk about it on the regular podcast last week because it hadn't happened yet. But to me, it seemed fairly obvious that if you were going to make cuts, these were the sorts of cuts you were going to make, I guess. And so Perfect Dark is done. The studio behind Perfect Dark has been closed. They were known as the Initiative, in case you forgot. They were based out of Santa Monica. And at some point, that game was in development long enough that things, like they had roped in Crystal Dynamics as an external contributor to that game. And so that deal is off. And so, hopefully Crystal Dynamics does not have to then turn around and cut jobs as a result of this bullshit. Rare has cut Everwild, which is a game that they announced, I want to say it was at 2019 that it was announced. A number of people from Rare have left the studio due to layoffs, but then on top of that, I think some managers who maybe were not part of the layoff have left the company. You'll see that in a couple of spots too, where people were like, "Oh, you canceled my game. Fuck this. I'm quitting." And so Everwild has been cut. The rest of it was largely unannounced projects, and the only detail we really have on that is an MMO from ZeniMax Online, the studio behind Elder Scrolls Online, was in development and apparently doing well. With Everwild and Perfect Dark, I think you can look at that and go yeah, these were games that got announced a while ago. They didn't have much to show, and it seemed like that maybe the stories. I think it was stories around Perfect Dark, especially, were this has kind of been a mess. Everwild, I suspect was maybe more of a they're still kind of finding it. They haven't really found it yet. Sea of Thieves was kind of similar in a sense, but Sea of Thieves had the opportunity to kind of ship and then find it, and they found it. That game has done quite well for them, is my understanding. But yeah, at the end of the day, those projects getting cut were not the most surprising things in the world. But this ZeniMax MMO was apparently very well regarded. People were saying hey, this could be a big deal. This is something that is kind of on track and doing well, and that got cut. That's a little bit of a harder one to kind of go oh, well, hey, they are cutting projects that, were probably right to cut in the first place, and so on. I think that just goes to show that these cuts are fucking coming from on high. And like we said, I said on the bonus show last week, when you're laying people off, a lot of times you are handed a number, and sometimes that number is a percentage, or sometimes it's a monetary figure. But usually it's hey, you need to cut 4% of your workforce, and we don't care where it comes from. That's for you to figure out. And so my guess is that Xbox, as a division, Phil Spencer gets handed a slip of paper with here's the fucking percentage, go make it happen. It's not actually, he's not actually handed a slip of paper, but but they are told, here are the cuts. They can fight and say hey, we need to save this job, we need to save this, and they can fight for those jobs at that time and try to shove some of those cuts off onto other non-gaming divisions, but at the end of the day, these cuts cut the entire company. I think this is something that you look at as like, this is Microsoft not in a time of crisis. They're one of, if not the world's most fucking valuable company in terms of stock price. But it is a situation where they are making these cuts, period. And you're like, okay, I guess that this is how they have to go. And people are going to try to speculate. Zorga in the chat is just saying, but why not Compulsion? It sucks, but their game wasn't crazy popular. And what did they have in progress? We don't know. It could be a handful of things where you're like, okay, if we're looking at these cuts, it's easier to try to cut entire teams and then around the edges of the teams that you're going to want to protect as best you can. It could be that Compulsion is a small enough studio that it's like, okay, they probably saw a couple of layoffs here and there, but maybe not shuttering the studio. That was something that people were speculating about, that Compulsion was going to be completely closed, but that is apparently not the case. And they just shipped a game. But if you believe in that studio and like, hey, the next thing that they've got lined up or the thing that they're pitching, we really want to try to protect it because we think it'll be a big deal down the line. Like, you've got to look at the full portfolio and try to figure it out. Turn 10 was another studio that was hit quite heavily, apparently. About half their crew was cut. And the word coming out of there from a former Turn 10 employee is basically that their take on it, this is not an official take on it, but their take on it is that Forza Motorsport is dead. And that the people that did not get laid off are people that are generally attached to the Forza Horizon side of the business. And as I kind of said on the bonus show, or kind of said last week, Forza Motorsport was a reboot that they took extra time to try to get it right. It shipped. It did not do the numbers that people wanted it to do. It did not recapture the magic of the early Forza Motorsport games. If you're looking at that situation and you're going like, okay, are we going to continue to make two separate car games, or are we going to be okay with just making one car game, and maybe 5 years down the line we can rebuild the motorsport team, and I don't know, we'll try to fucking figure it out. Like, you have to make these cuts, right? They have to come from somewhere. And so what do you do? I look at that and say, I think there is something sensible about like, okay, yeah, we probably don't need two separate Forza sub-franchises. Forza Horizon seems to be the clear favorite in terms of, I'm sure, most metrics these days. The nicest thing that people have said about the most recent Forza Motorsport was that they have made quite a bit of improvements to it since launch. Like the launch product, which is most of what I played of it, was not where it needed to be. But if people aren't coming back to it, if people aren't returning to it, and all of that, then you have to make that call. You have to make that decision, I guess. And I look at that as a sensible one. Forza Horizon seems like a product where there is not a lot of competition for that style of driving game. They are the leader in that specific field. Forza Motorsport, especially in a multi-platform world where they're going to be bringing these games to other platforms, is anyone going to choose Forza Motorsport over Gran Turismo? In years past, if you had asked me in the middle of the Xbox 360 era, what do you prefer? I would have said Forza Motorsport every single time. Through like 3 and 4, and I guess maybe not 5, but 3 and 4 for sure. I think the most recent Gran Turismo is a hell of a game. Their Jazzy Cafe and all that other stuff is a different vibe for sure, and you have to be into that sort of thing. But I think they even did a great job with the VR in Gran Turismo. It's fantastic. So I think if you look at it as like, okay, are we going to bring Forza Motorsport to the PlayStation and take on GT head on? How well is that going to go? How well are our Game Pass numbers going to go? Like, what's our future prospects for the motorsport side of this business? It's never easy because you're cutting real people with real jobs and real lives, and that part is fucking terrible. But I think if you were looking at it from a project view, I think it's very easy to look at that and go like, yeah, we really don't. We really can't justify maintaining this end of the business right now in this, with this specific crisis. And And so I look at those cuts and I feel like I can mostly explain them. But then you get to some of these other projects that are probably not all that expensive. In the like the Romero Games, the Romero Games was in the news through all of this stuff, where John and Brenda Romero have a team of 100-ish people. They're based out of Ireland, and they were working on a shooter, and they lost their funding. Now they have not connected the dots on this. They have put out a statement yesterday to kind of set the record straight about a lot of the news that has been swirling around Romero Games. And they have said, due to confidentiality agreements, we cannot disclose the publisher's identity, though some may infer it from public information. And so it is likely that everyone has said that was a game that Microsoft was funding and they have since killed. Or rather, they have dropped it, I guess is the technical term there. Now, it's hard for me to envision a scenario where John Romero's new game is like an extremely expensive endeavor. And so making that cut just seems weird to me. And that's not a cut that comes with headcount because they don't own Romero Games. It's not like they're laying people off. So that tells me like the layoffs are more, it is not just a 4% of headcount number. It was a revenue number. Or, I mean, if you want to get super fucking conspiratorial about this stuff, which I don't like doing, but maybe they took this opportunity to make more cuts on that end than they needed to, because they're like, hey, if we're going to take the hit on this layoff generally, let's really right the ship. Maybe they weren't feeling the Romero game. Maybe they were like, maybe this is not a project. Maybe this is, maybe this is a good time for us to get out of it. I don't know. But normally, I feel like layoffs, like people are your most expensive thing, right? External projects like this, where you're just paying an external studio to make a game, that's a different type of money. That's a different scale of money than paying for people and benefits and all the other stuff. And so I look at that, and with it hitting multiple things like that, it's just, I don't know, like a lot of layoffs are not usually structured in that specific way. And so that's why I say that. But we'll never, ultimately we will never know. But that struck me as a little weird as a part of this process, because again, generally, you're looking to cut people in a layoff scenario, not just, fix your balance sheet or whatever. So anyway, we had a few, after the Romero stuff happened, like there were a handful of days where people were like, oh my God, Romero Games is closing their doors. They're out of business. This is history. They laid off 100 people. It's wrapped up. It's this, it's that. And so yesterday they put out a statement. I'll just read it in full here. This is from Romero Games, which is again, John Romero and Brenda Romero's studio. We want to address recent reports regarding the status of Romero Games. The reports have contained inaccuracies, and we feel it's important to set the record straight. And it's a series of bullet points. The funding for our project was pulled, and our game was canceled. Due to confidentiality agreements, we cannot disclose the publisher's identity, though some may infer it from public information. As a result, we now have to reassess the entire staffing of our studio. Romero Games is not closed, and we are doing everything in our power to ensure that it does not come to that. Any suggestion otherwise is factually incorrect. Indeed, we were in the studio today to discuss next steps with the team. We've been contacted by several publishers interested in helping us bring the game across the finish line, and we're currently evaluating those opportunities. We appreciate the outpouring of support and will share further updates as we are able. And so it sounds like that other publishers have stepped in, because, this is, in some cases, depending on how far along a game like this is, this could be a deal for a publisher. You're like, wait a minute, Microsoft has funded a game 60% of the way there, and we can swoop in at the end, and just for some marketing money and whatever else, we get to publish a game and take 30. Great, love it, awesome. Of course, like the number of publishers that could step in and do that is increasingly small as time goes on. And that's a whole separate problem. And it is cool that they have the ability to do this, because there are certainly some cases where a game gets canceled and the publisher retains certain rights over the project or the IP or whatever else, right? And so, but it does sound like that they are relatively free and clear to shop this game around to someone else if they can find someone in a short period of time. Well, I don't know what their financial situation is and how long they can afford to float the costs of their staff without a publishing deal in place. But hopefully they'll get a good deal and not a fast deal, not just a fast deal, I guess. Hopefully they but it sounds like that they have at least several publishers who are at least reaching out with interest, and we'll see if any of them kind of put it back together. I think that's an easy PR victory for a publisher if they're ever in need of one. And without knowing how big this project is and how funding is, they say that they have 100 employees, so you can kind of back that out into a run rate, I guess, if you really wanted to. But I'm not gonna do that kind of math, not here right now. But do you end up, I don't know, does Annapurna pick something like this up? Does Devolver pick something like this up? Does PlayStation pick it up for just an extra little knife twist there? You could see a number of different scenarios, I suppose. But maybe Epic ends up publishing it. That's Epic can afford to do that, I assume. But yeah, I don't, I'm trying to think who are the publishers that still have money that are still signing projects. It's a pretty small list these days. But again, this type of project doesn't come along very often, right? Where you've got something that has been largely, or not large, I don't know how complete this game is. But if they've already gotten a lot of funding and they've already made a lot of this game, if you can just kind of come in and finish it up and help them get it out the door, that's a nice project to be a part of. That's free money for a publisher past a certain point, right? And of course, everyone wants John and Brenda Romero to succeed. Like that, they're nice people out there in Ireland making it happen. On top of that, yeah. And that's, so that's kind of it in terms of the cuts as we are aware of them. Again, the ZeniMax MMO seems like an outlier because I think the other internal projects that we know have been cut, you look at them and you can see rough seas on some of those, right? But to hear that the ZeniMax MMO was, maybe a little far off, but also that people seemed to be really liking where it was headed, sucks. There's been other bits and pieces of rumors and things that have kind of come up and been shot down or whatever. Microsoft actually came out and shot one of them down themselves because last Wednesday, in the middle of all this, there was talk of Phil Spencer is preparing to retire when the next batch of hardware comes out. He's getting ready to hand the reins over to Sarah Bond. They're getting her ready to do this and that. Microsoft kind of came out and said, Phil Spencer is planning to be here for years to come. And I think that's largely what they said is nah, that's not. Which, retirement stuff is, people are on contracts and, at the end of a 5-year deal, you re-up or you don't or whatever. And, I don't know. But people calling for Phil Spencer's head and whatever, I think, there's, I look at this as there's been some failure of leadership here on the Xbox side of things, but these cuts are not necessarily part of that. I think you could look at Matt Booty's been overseeing studios and for a while now, and they have grown. Not every single Microsoft gaming project is under his purview, but how much time does a team like that have to run this many different studios? You heard about when Starfield came out and was kind of off base. and off track a little bit there at launch. I think the quote from Matt Booty was like, yeah, we've been really hands off with some of these studios we've acquired, and maybe we should have been more hands on earlier. I think that was something around Redfall, actually. Well, there was that sentiment there around Redfall, that they kind of let them do their thing and then realized like, oh, this thing that you've been doing is not the thing that we wish you were doing. And so I can't really lay blame on an individual person here, because I just don't know enough about the organization and who does what in the org chart. Like, you can infer it from head of studios and head of gaming and all that other stuff. Ultimately, I think the thing is, that Phil Spencer has said himself, is that the buck stops with him. That he is the leader of that group, and all of that sort of stuff. And so I do think that they have gotten off track in a number of ways. They have been off track for a very long time. And I think that that's something they need to take a very long look in the mirror and go like, what is this company? And I think that they're in the middle of figuring that out, and they're in the middle of making that transition, right? Like, they are practically giving up on their own hardware, unless they're announcing something really strange. But when you get out there and you talk about the freedom of Windows, and when you get out there and you're partnering for the Xbox Ally, and you're doing all of these different devices, and it looks like the next generation is going to be a series of personal computers, instead of these kind of closed platform, the traditional Xbox and PlayStation kind of relationship or whatever. Like, I think that their business is still undergoing a massive transition, as it has been for a number of years. And so I think that there's an identity crisis to a certain extent. What is Xbox? And what is Xbox on the other side of this? They're going to try and make it mean a lot of different things than it meant 20 years ago. That's for sure. And they are still all working for a company that is chasing after this AI nightmare. And so what horrible shit are they going to... Like, is every single one of these devices going to have an NPU in it, and they're going to go like, and you can talk to Copilot at any point while you're playing a game? Because of course you can. Of course you'll be able to. Of course you will say, hey, Copilot, what do I do next? I'm stuck on this quest. They're testing it on a mobile app. Like, if you're in the test flight, or on Android, it's a little more loose, but if you have the test flight version of the Xbox app on your phone, it currently has test functionality for, hey, Copilot, where do I go next? What do I do next? Those are all things that they're going to try to build. They'll try to get game developers to use it, even if it's not a mandate, which I think Compulsion Games got out there and said like, oh, no, they're not making us use AI to do stuff. But again, if the company is going to increasingly align itself with all of this AI shit, and you want your division to survive inside of this company, those are the calls you're going to make. Those are the calls that are no longer yours to make. You're like, well, this is what this company is, and so I need to help them justify the amount of money they're setting on fire over here by making sure that my division is contributing to the fire. I don't know what they're like, that whole thing is going to be a part of it. And so again, I think you can look at this as some sort of failure of leadership, but I don't think that it's this moment. I think it's a previous moment and several previous moments where this company has been wrestling with its identity for kind of a long time now, and trying to figure out how to turn that corner. And so you can lay that at Phil Spencer's feet because he is the head of that division, but is it actually his problem, or is it something where he is getting where the CEO is coming to him and forcing his hand on a lot of things? I don't have the answer to those questions, is my point here. I'm not trying to like stake out some kind of defense of Xbox's leadership or whatever, but I do think that they've had a lot of fucking shitty hands dealt to them. I think that they have dealt a few of their own shitty hands as well. And they have not always made the right calls, but I can't sit here and tell you like, you've got to wipe all these people out. I don't have the answer to that. And I don't think that that's, I don't think that that's necessarily accurate either. But also, it's it's a huge problem for Xbox going forward. This is not something that like where they made these tough cuts and it's always challenging, but never fear. The Division is doing, like, they have their bad day, but also like the word was, any games that were shown in the Xbox showcase are safe, whatever that means. That means that those projects are still running. Those projects might be running with fewer people on them now, because some of those layoffs touched a lot of different studios, right? And so what does it mean when they say, all of these first party games, Grounded 2 is fine, Double Fine's Keeper is fine, what happens next year? What happens at the end of next fiscal when they look at these books all over again? And, because a lot of these games still won't be out by then. Is Clockwork Revolution going to ship soon? No, probably not, right? And so I look at that and go what, how, you can't, and this is a problem if you're working for them more than anything else. Like for us on the outside, it's just like, well, I don't believe you until these games ship anymore. Like that. Okay, that's fine. It doesn't matter. But if you're working there and you're thinking about, should I continue to work here? Should I take a job somewhere else? Should I work at Microsoft? Should I work on Xbox games? It becomes a different situation of just like, I don't know that, I don't know that I believe him. I don't know. Like if I go there, what if I go there and I work for years on a project and it goes like it gets killed? Like, I think it does a lot of damage to their kind of that profile. The benefit that they get is that the whole industry is so fucked right now that if anyone's hiring, they're going to be psyched. So the idea of like, should I work for Xbox is less of a decision as opposed to should I work anywhere. That's obviously a bad industry-wide situation that is not just a Microsoft thing. But yeah, when we look at, I'm trying to look at the first party stuff or the owned and operated stuff that they had at the showcase. Like the Gears of War Reloaded thing, that's probably damn near done if it's not already. Like they've run that beta. They're gonna, they're shipping that in August. Black Ops 7, they'll make I'm sure those cuts were made, but like that game is already so well into production and, wrapping up in a sense, I'm sure, it's already July. Outer Worlds 2, I'm sure is fine. I'm sure that's on track. Elder Scrolls Online is, relatively low touch, I guess, in a sense. Sea of Thieves is another kind of ongoing opportunity. You do wonder, like, how long do they continue to support Sea of Thieves? Do the numbers justify it? I know they just shipped Sea of Thieves on PlayStation relatively recently, and it sounded like that version of the game sold pretty well, so that probably gave them a lot of additional rope to work on more seasons of Sea of Thieves. Fallout 76, you have to kind of wonder about that, and how well is that doing? I honestly do not know. Elder Scrolls Online sounds like it's been doing quite well for a while. I assume that is still doing okay. But yeah, like Clockwork Revolution, they have interests in Ninja Gaiden 4, but obviously that's not them. That's not purely them. That game is still in some form of production, and I'm sure it's fine. But Fable was not here. Fable was not shown at the showcase. Fable was also not like publicly killed last week, so we assume that Fable is still in development in some way. And yeah, like Bethesda's gonna issue a Fallout 3 remake at some point. Like, they've got Fallout stuff in the works. That's a given. And so yeah, it's this weird thing where this is still a very large publishing, developing organization that is still going to publish and develop, but at the same time, what are they doing, and when are they going to do it, and when are they going to figure it all out? When are they going to feel like when is the Xbox division going to feel like something that's like stable is not the word, but I really feel like it's been a lot of years now. Like I said, I've said it before that Microsoft always felt like they were just about to turn the corner. They were like one or two decisions away from being like, okay, we have righted the ship. We have corrected most of the errors from, you know, some of the decisions made in the Matrix era. And we're at least, we have at least stopped some of that bleeding, and we've, you know, and then they ran into a pandemic, and then they ran into this and that. And, you know, like some of this stuff is, you know, the business changed out from under them while they were trying to change what they were. And now they're changing into a different thing on top of that. And now they're an AI company, because of course they are, and like all this fucking horseshit. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's a fucking weird, it's a very weird time for everyone in video games. But Microsoft's stuff is, again, partially like some of this stuff coming to collect after a lot of years of things not being right, in conjunction with the company's continued willingness to like throw a bunch of money away on AI stuff and whatever. So we'll see. I mean, you know, presumably they will have something to say about Halo. When they said as much, that they will show something related to Halo at the Halo World Championships, which apparently still exist. But yeah. Meanwhile, the top story on Xbox Wire, which, if you've been a long-time listener to this show, should not come as a surprise. Helldivers 2 has come to Xbox on August 26th. PlayStation Publishing LLC is bringing Helldivers 2 to the Xbox. That is going to be a $40 game, unless you want the Super Citizen version of the game, which is $60. Looks like Nixies is doing the port work there to bring it to another platform. And yeah, they should do that. They should, I mean, a multiplayer game like Helldivers 2 should be on every platform. I am of the mind that this is not the last platform we will see Helldivers 2 appear on. But yeah, someone asking Game Pass. No, it is not going to be a Game Pass game. PlayStation does not have an extremely vested interest in putting their games onto Microsoft's Game Pass. Maybe that was something that would show up later down the road. This is an interesting kind of like exercise in headline writing. Someone asked that question on the Discord for the whatever the official Helldivers 2 Discord is, and there was a screenshot going around of basically like a community manager, like someone, you know, in an official capacity responding and saying, no, there's no plans to bring it to Game Pass. Which then some headline writers took that to be like, and Helldivers 2 is never coming to Game Pass. Like, that is not at all what was said. That is 100% not what was said. All they said is currently, as of the answering of that question, tomorrow that could change. There were no plans to bring it to Game Pass. That's not me saying it will come to Game Pass. I would be a little surprised if it did come to Game Pass. But all they said, no current plans to bring it to Game Pass. I could, you know, if 6 months down the line, I could see it showing up. That wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world, but that is not what they said. They did not say it would never ever come to Game Pass. So there is probably some sort of chance of that happening down the line. And for a multiplayer focused game, I think it makes sense for a lot of those types of games to eventually end up on Game Pass for at least a brief period of time. Anyway, so I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that either. But yeah, that's kind of, again, you know, that stuff. It's sort of weird because we kind of talked about it two podcasts straight, but the last time we were talking about it, it was the day before it happened. So kind of a weird way this all worked out. But yeah, the layoffs have certainly taken up quite a bit of the last week for sure. And there's been, there's little bits and pieces like, a guy who was I think on the Xbox publishing team thought he was helping by getting on LinkedIn and just like, I just want to say, if you lost your job, it's tough. If sometimes mentally it's hard to get back out there and look for a job. And so here are some prompts you could use on Copilot or Chat GPT to help you find another job. And it was just like, it was the ultimate fucking read the room moment. I'm saying if that guy still has a job, look, Adam Orth was robbed anyway. But like, if Adam Orth said what he said and got what he got for like a pretty fucking benign thing back in the day, ancient history, and this guy gets a fucking pass for this bullshit, which he has since deleted, give me a motherfucking break. Are you kidding me? Justice for Adam Orth. That's what I'm saying. Oh, he's fine. Ars Technica has dared to ask the question, what's wrong with AAA games? Now, this article is not about that, to be fair. But they have put together a very large and this is a lot of this is kind of anonymous sources, but they are saying according to firsthand accounts. Like this is let's call this what appears to be an inside look at the ongoing development of the next Battlefield game. This is an interesting read. I think you should go over to arstechnica.com and read this very long article about the next Battlefield game and how it has gone. This is where the number came from. The 100 million players number has been coming from. You've probably seen that little bit of it yanked out and reported around as like the expectations for the next Battlefield is that it will have 100 million players. Meanwhile, people that kind of crunched some numbers on other versions of Battlefield have discovered that like even the best-selling Battlefield games were somewhere in the 30 million range. So the idea of this game somehow reaching 100 million, and that's not at launch. That is over time. I don't think they're necessarily saying day one we want to, and it's not them saying they want to sell 100 million copies of the game either. But these are like Fortnite numbers. These are like Warzone. These are numbers for a game that has a free to play component, I guess I would say. And so that is kind of talked around a little bit here. But it does seem to be that they would have to have some kind of free-to-play component to this game, sort of like Call of Duty, in order to even approach that sort of number. Yeah, Apex Legends is they're in the 30 million range or something. Like, you could argue that Battlefield is a much larger property. I would also argue that Battlefield has been tarnished by its last few releases and is not the same Battlefield it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. That is not the same. That does not have the same cachet that it used to. They have pissed a little bit of it away. Not all of it, but it ain't what it used to be. So this is a reporting coming from Samuel Axon on Ars Technica, who has spoken to a number of people here. Here's a quote about this 100 million thing. Obviously, Battlefield has never achieved those numbers before, one EA employee told me. It's important to understand that over about that same period, Battlefield 2042 has only gotten 22 million, another said. Even 2016's Battlefield 1, the most successful in the franchise by numbers, had achieved maybe 30 million plus. And then it goes on to say, like, of course, those did not have any kind of free-to-play mode or anything like that. It was thought that if Glacier, which is the code name for the next Battlefield, as a fan of Glacier, I appreciate that he is being honored in this way. it could achieve comparable numbers, so a free-to-play battle royale mode was made a core offering for the title, alongside a 6-hour single-player campaign, traditional Battlefield multiplayer modes like Conquest and Rush, and a new free-to-play mode called Gauntlet, and a community content mode called Portal, which they've done Portal stuff in the past. I'm not going to say that Battle Royale is done as a genre and no one's ever going to break through ever again or anything like that. But I don't know that I think that Battlefield as a franchise is the franchise to like do it. When I think about Battlefield style gameplay and Battlefield moments and what the best parts of the Battlefield franchise has been over the years, it's hard for me to envision a scenario where Battle Royale really fits into that well. I mean, you could do it. It's a guy with a gun, right? And there are vehicles. So yeah, you could jump out of a fucking plane. You and your squad, like, you know, the Battlefield at its best is you and 3 other people jumping in a fucking Jeep and getting into trouble. And so you could maybe do that in a Battle Royale style configuration and have a good time with it. I think some of the best times I had in PUBG were that. Were situations where, you know, like we're getting together, we're rolling around, you know, before PUBG got very difficult at higher levels. Back when PUBG was new and no one was like really great at it yet. It was a great time. It's a great time. But also, like, this is back in early 2023, according to this article, Battlefield's budget was over $400 million, which is already more than was originally planned at the start of it. And so they're already over budget. You will remember Ridgeline Games, which was the studio, I believe, out of the Pacific Northwest, somewhere up in that area, with Marcus Leto, who's formerly of the Halo team, was running that studio, and they were running single player. That studio has been shut down. And so a big focus of this article is that single player is like years behind schedule, and now they've got Criterion and all these other teams trying to fucking cobble something together. And so who knows what the fuck that campaign is going to be. Hey, you know, game development is tough. Like you're set back with weird situations and changes, and things happen all the time. But reading this article and reading over, you know, what is a relatively blow by blow account of, you know, how Battlefield has gone. It seems very difficult. They've brought in new leadership. Obviously, Vince Zampella is kind of overseeing the entire Battlefield group now. And, you know, some of the longtime DICE people who, you know, made that series what it was have left. It's rough stuff. But it's also an interesting look at how, you know, like there's talk in there about how EA kind of evaluates games that are in development and when they're in full production and when they're ready to go, and the number of gates they need to go through in order to kind of be considered, you know, to be out of alpha in production, whatever. Like, you know, if you're interested in that sort of nitty gritty, this story has some details on that I think are fascinating. But also it gets into just like, hey man, yeah, people were working their asses off and they're getting burned out, and the organization is, you know, according to the people, the sources for this story, the organization is not necessarily there to support them in the way that they wish they were. And, you know, like that goes back to some of the EA spouse stuff and, you know, situations that you would think would be better by now. But when the chips are down on a project like this, it is not. They are not. And so it's an interesting story. It's an interesting story. And then when you think about the financial burden being put onto this game for it to be considered a success, if they're saying, hey, 100 million people need to play this, like if you're spending over $400 million on this game, I assume that is pre-marketing. I maybe not, but like this is a moonshot in a way that you're like, I don't like, and you know, this game has gotten off track and things have happened and that all costs money, right? And so remember the thing that we say about financial forecasting, and when companies say we expect this game to do X number of people, they have to say that because they already spent the money and they're in the process of spending the money. And so they're not going to say we forecast this game to fucking lose us a ton of money. They're going to get out there and say, we're forecasting this to, you know, like to hit this number, because if we didn't think it would hit this number, then why would we have greenlit this budget in the first place? That would be silly. Of course it's going to make its money back. And then after the fact, they can go like, oh, it didn't make its money back. I don't know. We laid everybody off. It was a tough market. The vision was fine. It was the execution that was the problem. Like, all right, well, I don't know. The execution doesn't sound like amazing this time out either. They've been running betas for the game. People seem, I've seen some footage of it from some of those closed betas, and the parts of it that look like Battlefield, I look at and go, yeah, that looks like a Battlefield game. I would be down to play a Battlefield game. And I'd be down to look at a single player campaign if it was well made or whatever, but like I'm not really interested in a bunch of additional tacked on modes and free to play this and that. Like if you're telling me, hey man, rush mode is really good and it's back, I'm like, cool. If the maps are good and the class kits and all the other stuff are like fun to put together, then yeah, that's probably something I would fuck around with, at least for a while. But like, you know, the idea that they're gonna like also that they're gonna kind of have like 5 different games in one, you know, which is a very Call of Duty style approach of like, oh, we're gonna do this campaign, we're gonna do this, we're gonna have this multiplayer mode, this is gonna be the free to play part, and chase after that kind of, you know, Call of Duty, you know, multiple pillars of engagement or whatever. I look at it as a problem where I don't think that Battlefield has truly successfully addressed any one of their pillars for about 2 or 3 games now. And this kind of needs to be something more than that. I think the other factor here is, you know, Delta Force is out, and that is coming to console pretty soon here. That's, you know, that's a game that is also trying to do about 3 different things. I don't know if their campaign ever shipped or not. They did not launch with a campaign, but there is a very Battlefield-esque mode in that is, you know, that was decent. There's also like kind of an extraction shooter mode in it that I thought was not very engaging in my time with it. But that is free to play. And so, and that is apparently like their numbers are on the rise. These days, I think when that thing launched, I think I played a chunk of it before it came out and was not super impressed with it. I came away from it thinking like, yeah, you know, this is like kind of a trashy Battlefield clone in a few ways. And, you know, it was functional and all right, but it just, I don't know. It just didn't feel like it necessarily had the juice, if you will. And then the extraction shooter mode I thought was like really, it just felt really half baked. I don't know. And the campaign was not live yet. I don't know if the campaign has rolled out since then, but they launched without their campaign in place. But it sounds like that they are at least finding success online, that people on Steam are downloading that game and playing it, and their console version's about to roll out here pretty soon. So maybe they have cracked the nut on the free-to-play Battlefield thing in a way that EA never did, which honestly doesn't necessarily bode well for a Battlefield game shipping this fiscal year. If that game is going to pick up steam and keep rolling, that is another problem that they're going to have to face in the middle of all this. But we'll kind of see how all that goes, I guess. Anyway, that's the news. I would be happy to play a great new Battlefield game, I think, is where I'm at on this stuff. I have had really, I mean, I don't think anything's ever going to truly recapture the magic of Battlefield 2 for me. And some people, I think, they go back even further and they want Battlefield Vietnam. They want that feeling again. And I don't think you can do that anymore, because I think that there are so many that was a game that felt like it was from the fucking future with how they engineered it and how it came together, and the large player count, which was impressive at the time, and just the size and scope of Battlefield 2 was fucking crazy. It's an incredible game. It is a landmark moment. It's the sort of thing that you kind of can't recapture, because it was a technological achievement as well as like a great video game and all this other stuff. And so I think the very idea of like a new Battlefield game, like it's a different thing now, like there's nothing immediately like, oh, you're reshaping the history of video games with the next Battlefield. It's just not that. It's not that. There are so many multiplayer games, so many shooters come and go all the time now. It's such a different landscape that the idea of a brand new Battlefield game, it can only mean so much. Unless they're going to do, dramatically crazy different things and do it all over again. But I don't think there is such a thing as do it all over again. Because what is that? What would a modern day game have to do to have the impact of Battlefield 2 from a competitive shooter standpoint? Is it a size and scope thing? Would you have to go even crazier and bigger? Would it have to be 1,000 players? Would it have to be mag times 10? Would it have to be, more players in commander view and, more aspects of the battlefield being represented from command and control all the way down to the boots on the ground? What's the, that stuff sounds like potentially engaging from a technological standpoint, but that doesn't immediately sound like an amazing game. Right? The bigger the battlefield gets, the more detached you feel from the action. And so, there is a right size to that type of experience. I really liked Planet Side. Planet Side was really crazy. It wasn't always the best game. I don't think the Planet Side was always like an amazing video game. I don't think the shooting was mind-blowing in that game. In fact, the shooting was kind of fucked up because it was a large-scale network game in an era where that was barely possible. And so, that part of it was not always great. But the scope and the feel and the concept behind Planet Side, in terms of like, holy shit, there are so many players that can be online at a time, and we're rolling across this battlefield, and the three factions, and this faction rolls up and flanks us, and this, like, all this stuff is happening all live, 24 hours a day, one server. Like, that was a crazy thing that I don't think you can do anymore. A couple of the minds, a few of the names behind Planet Side are working on a new game, and they are trying to evoke that lineage. It is a military themed game. It is not a space sci-fi anything. It is, but they are trying to bill it as like an MMO type thing, but also it is fucking on the fucking blockchain, and they're gonna issue a token, and so you just look at it and go like, all right, you guys are you are not serious about this, in the way that I need you to be. so fucking whatever. And that's a damn shame, because I think people, like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if there was a new Planet Side? I'm like, yeah, it would be cool. I don't know if you could do it. I don't know if you could make it happen. I don't know if you could actually pull it off. But again, like, yeah, what you Dust 514, like, yeah, there's all these handfuls of little things that scrape up against something larger, right? And yeah, I don't know. Like, you don't get as many games that are doing that these days. Or rather, I guess the technological improvements are like, they come in a different way. Because engineering and the way you engineer these large scale network experiences, I think, has gotten a lot smarter and saner. And some of that informs design in ways where you don't get these like weird moonshot, like, there's 5,000 players here and they're all shooting at you. And you're like, what the fuck? Yeah, it's, no one tries to make a game that is like broken. They're just like, I don't know, it's fucking, it's gonna explode, but like, hey, at least we're doing it. Rad Jago says, I always liked games with bigger metagame online components like Mech Assault 2 and Chrome Hounds. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do think that kind of thing is sort of missing. The metagame, like, you know, hey, we're going to fight over a seat. Like one of the Mortal Kombats tried to do that, where you would pick a faction and then all of your online fights, you know, it's a very thin version of what we're talking about, but you would fight for that faction, and then a faction would win the season, and it would go from that. Like Helldivers, yeah, Helldivers is a great example of, like, they kind of do that. Helldivers 2 pushes in that direction and tries to have some sort of you know, like a governed thing, like they're pushing in a direction, right? Of like, oh, we're gonna have this live event here. It might just seem like a live event, but also like, oh, there's more robots coming here, and oh, this big attack happened. And when Helldivers was in the first handful of months there, and that stuff was really happening, like it felt like every day there were more interesting stories about Helldivers. And now it's kind of calmed down. It's that whole thing is kind of simmered down a little bit, and they obviously went through that period where people were super mad at them, and I think that kind of stamped out a lot of the enthusiasm that people were having for Helldivers. But also I think certain aspects of that sort of just ran its course a little bit. Or, I mean, not to say people are still quietly enjoying the shit out of Helldivers 2, but it is, you know, it feels like that they kind of, they did the things that they did, the cool things they were going to do, and people are now kind of aware of what those tricks are and the scope of them and what have you. But that was the thing I think I really appreciated about Helldivers 2. Like, as much as I kind of didn't stick to that game very much, it's I really appreciate the thing that they built and the kind of the ongoing world, like a little bit of world crafting, a little bit of like dungeon master type hand on the game. Like, we're going to pivot it this way so that players do that. Like, you know, like, I think that's a really interesting concept too, as to like, okay, we're going to like tweak the game this way in very kind of direct opposition to what the players are doing. Like, oh, the players are doing, oh, they're getting a little too good at this. Okay, send them this. Send them this. Let's keep the challenge over here. And having a game that can adapt in that way, or a team that can adapt to the way the players are playing the game, I think that's a really awesome way to handle live service. And Helldivers, live service is kind of a weird way to describe it, because I think it is friendlier. They are not building a prison for people who love feet, I guess, over in Helldivers 2 world. It's friendlier over there. It's more like an honor farm. It's more like, I don't know, you were one drink over the line, and I mean, you can still drive to work, but at night you got to drive here and report to this place for 18 months because you were drunk driving. Anyway, let's get into some emails. Podcast@guard.bike is the email address. You can send in emails. You can. I know. It's crazy, but you can absolutely do it. And I will take a look at them. And so on and so forth. Let's see. Ian writes in from Manchester and says, I've always thought audio surf was a huge missed opportunity for one of the major companies or gaming as a whole. The technology worked well enough though better on some songs than others. Snoop's What's My Name was essentially perfect, and fast punk songs made for a great downhill thrill ride, while sweeping rock ballads like Estranged were also well suited. If you're not familiar with audio surf, it is a rhythm game where you're kind of dealing with a note highway coming your way, but the difference is that it is an algorithm that you feed it any music that you have, and it builds a track for you, sort of like VibRibbon. And VibRibbon, if you're not familiar, is it anyway? But audio surf is a rhythm game where and here's the answer to your question. AudioSurf is a rhythm game where they can sell 0 DLC because you don't need to buy songs for it because you can bring your own songs to it. Now let's get to the rest of your question. I appreciate there could be publishing or copyright issues if the game got big enough, but perhaps a company with an existing agreement like Apple or Spotify could have snapped it up and integrated it into their offerings. Given the broad appeal of puzzle games and leaderboards among friends, it seems like a layup. Am I missing something? Was AudioSurf 2 just that weak? So, AudioSurf 2 did not do the thing for me the way I wanted it done. It was better in some ways. It was cool. The other game, the VR game they did, which was, it was very Beat Saber-esque, but it was like you were punching instead of slashing. I forget the name of that game, but that was a pretty good one of those for VR that I liked that more than Beat Saber from a gameplay perspective. But anyway, also you could very easily bring your own songs to it, and that was the cool part. I like your idea of a music provider getting into this, right? I like the idea of like, oh yeah, what if Apple or Spotify or Qobuz or Deezer? What if Deezer bought AudioSurf? What if Tidal bought AudioSurf? But yeah, what if it, if it worked with any game on their streaming service, right? If you're like, okay, now I can integrate Spotify into it. And the VR game, what they did, instead of you bringing MP3s, is you could attach it to a YouTube video. And so since YouTube videos, and that's how they would build leaderboards, is because you could say, oh, I'm going to play this YouTube video, and it's going to build a level for me out of the music in this YouTube video. And then if other people do that YouTube video, a leaderboard forms. Deezer has some appeal for highly specific reasons. But anyway, I like that idea, but also I don't know like how many subscribers that's maybe a decent differentiator in terms of standing out from other music streaming services. But are people looking for that? Are people looking to actually do that? Is that something that people want to do in enough quantities to where you integrating AudioSurf into your music streaming platform brings people to your platform instead of another one? It'd probably be relatively cheap in the grand scheme of things. Like you could do it. That'd be neat. But yeah, I think that's kind of a neat idea. But also, the thing with AudioSurf is, one of the nice things about rhythm games is that it's a source of DLC sales. And so Beat Saber, unless you're looking to kind of live outside the lines, Beat Saber is a closed platform where you buy the music directly from them and the levels come from them. Now, I think most of us know that there is a burgeoning scene of custom tracks for for Beat Saber, and a lot of other pre-existing rhythm games over the years. I don't know if anyone's making DJ Hero customs these days, but that would be interesting. But certainly, Fuser, people putting new music into Fuser has been fantastic. Obviously, DDR has been a bastion or step mania, whatever the kind of open source DDR clones that you can get your hands on. And Clone Hero has been a really good kind of fake rock band, fake guitar hero kind of thing that people make their own tracks for. But AudioSurf had the benefit of like it would automatically make its own tracks. And sometimes the tracks were not great, but even the ones that weren't great were still serviceable. And so at the time, AudioSurf was really incredible. I think it was a really amazing project, and the ideas that came to the follow-ups of like integrating YouTube videos and building leaderboards and all of that other stuff, I think was really smart. But I don't know that I would call it a massive missed opportunity from like the music industry or a major company or whatever, because I think that sort of thing only gets so big, and I don't think it would be a massive smash hit integrated into Apple Music or Spotify or anything like that. I don't think it would provide a ton of revenue. Like people wouldn't be like, oh man, I have to stick with this service over another service because my leaderboard scores on this stuff matter to me. Like I don't know that there would be enough people in that specific bucket to matter. So, and from a gaming perspective, I think it's a limited opportunity for a major gaming publisher to pick it up because, again, the whole crux of AudioSurf is that you can make your own levels and you don't have to buy DLC. It is an awesome independent project that like existed so far outside of the norm for where rhythm games were at that time. It was fucking awesome. But I don't know. I don't know if it was something that would have ever gotten that much bigger than that. But I do kind of like the idea of like, what if it was built into Apple Music? What if it was built into, I don't know. Yes, Qobuz or whatever. Anders writes in and asks, how would you approach coming up with a soundtrack for the Buck Bumble remake? I feel like I haven't cared much for video game music since Quake, but this could be the shot in the arm the industry really needs. Jungle has been on its way back for the past couple of years now. It feels like that it is kind of breaking through again. I know I have suddenly been listening to a lot more Jungle over the last 6 to 9 months. So the time is right for the time is right for Buck Bumble to come back. And so, yeah, I think I would just have like massive fucking, yeah, I would probably, I think you would just do like a big fucking heavy, massive in the original sense, album of stuff. Yeah, I mean, is it more UK garage? I mean, I guess we could make that argument if you want to, that it's more of a garage track than pure jungle, I guess. But I would make a super fucking jungle heavy fucking Buck Bumble album, remix album that is just 3 hours. And occasionally the lyrics come in. Like there would be no other songs. It would not be like, oh, this is a different track. It would just be like, yeah, here's some fucking, here is the fucking amen break for fucking 4 hours straight. Fly this bee around, I guess. Don't even fuck the game. Like, no, like we don't even need the fucking game. Just don't even bother making a new Buck Bumble game. Just someone should fucking make a fucking 4 hour fucking mix. That perpetually has the Buck Bumble lyrics over it. That's what I would do. I would not make a game. All right. Let's see here. This is kind of a weird. James writes in episode 456 of The Computer Game Show, Ellie Gibson, former editor of GamesIndustry.biz, spoke about her time as the editor of GameIndustry.biz. And how one time her boss forced her to go to dinner with representatives from Sony in order to let the Sony suits dress them down as they disagreed with an article about PS3 sales figures that the website published. During your time as an employee of a large... This is all... Okay, so let's start there. That's fucking crazy. That's a ridiculous thing to fucking do to someone working for you. During your time as an employee of larger game publications, was this a normal thing for either you or others around you? Did your boss ever make you go sit in front of people you wrote an article about and allow them to talk down to you while you bit your tongue? I know that you not doing this sort of thing is what created it, but have you heard of something like this happening? So no. But I was the firewall in a lot of cases. So there were the whole goal, and this is especially with reviews, but this situation that they're talking about is like a news story, which is, I think, ridiculous. The line with this is you say, hey, if you have factual inaccuracies if you want to point out factual inaccuracies with the article, I would love to hear them and we will take a look at it. If you know, and that's what I would have said to Sony in this situation if they did not like, and this, it says it's an article about PS3 sales figures, which sales figures usually, that's a number. So if they're disagreeing with the number, then they need to provide the number. If they want to set the record straight, then they can set the record straight. If it's if they say, oh, this number's wrong, like that's a pretty cut and dry thing. And then you would go and you would say, hey, you would add to the article and say, since publishing this article, Sony has reached out and said, actually, the number is this. And so that is what they say. If you were looking at that and going like, actually, Sony was right and we were in the wrong, then you make a correction. Otherwise, you are publishing it alongside it and saying like, our reporting says this, the official word from them is this. And that's kind of where it ends. Without knowing more about the exact situation, it's kind of hard to say what the response would have been there. But the thing with reviews, over the years, I have had plenty of publishers come to me and say, I have a problem with a review that is up on your website. It's a relatively normal thing. It would happen a few times every year, usually in the fourth quarter of the year. You take the phone call, you take the emails, whatever it is, and you say, like, I'm happy to hear it out. If you have factual inaccuracies that you want to point out, that you think the review is factually inaccurate, then I will take a look at it. But if you're going to come to me and you're going to say, we think the game is better than you do, then we are all wasting our time. You don't say that, but you let them say their piece. But they say it to me. They don't say it to the person who wrote the review. As the editor, it is my job to protect my people and fucking have that conversation and do not expose them to that fucking bullshit. Part of my job is to be exposed to that bullshit. And even in cases where if I wrote the review, the way we tried to do it is if it was someone with a problem with my review, they would talk to someone else, like Greg, or they would talk to someone else to keep it from getting personal, to keep it from getting full of attacks one way or the other. You're like, okay, I'll hear you out. What do you have to say about it? Okay, we will take a look at it. You present that information to the reviewer. You say, like, hey, what do you think about this? And they say, yeah, I don't agree with that. You go, okay. We looked into it. We stand by our review. And very usually that is the end of it. Occasionally they will want to escalate that, or they'll want to say like, oh, well, we're going to stop advertising, or we're going to go to your boss and we're going to say that. And so I've had, people in publisher roles come to me and saying like, hey, I'm hearing this from this. Yes, okay, here's the conversation I had with them. Their problem is that they think the game is better than we do. And that is supposed to be the end of it. That is supposed to be the like, okay, well, you're the editorial department, so that's what you do. And we stand by that, and we stand by that process. The process was followed to its logical conclusion. We're sorry if you're not happy with it, but that's how it goes sometimes. I have had publishers argue with hour counts, saying like, it takes about 8 hours to finish. Like, no! It takes 12! And you're like, all right, okay, I mean, some people will probably finish it in 6, but all right, there have been cases where it's like, okay, we'll change this number up a little bit, or like, maybe it might take you 10 hours, like, I could see it taking someone who is bad at this game longer than this. Like, okay. And they've tried to hang like a factual inaccuracy on an hour count, which is like a ridiculous, which is part of why I think at some point I stopped including hour counts in reviews, because it was just like, all right, fuck it. It's not like, is it a long game? Then, you know, you can say like, hey, it overstays its welcome. It feels about right, you know, without getting into just like, because different players have different skill levels. Hour counts are increasingly not useful in the first place. So whatever. But this is a situation where, you know, someone else should have taken that. Like, you don't put your fucking people on the firing line. You just fucking don't. You go when you hear them out, you know, and you fucking do that. Like, that is part of your fucking job as the lead editor, as the whatever, like, you know, like there is a buck stops with you sort of thing. As the person who ran fucking reviews, that was it. You talk to me. There's no, like, if you want to go above my head, go, but like fucking, I don't give a shit. Like, they can fucking kick me out of here over this. It's fine. Well, I didn't think that at the time. It turned out to be fine. But that is like part of it, right? It's just like, okay, like this is the process if you have a problem with a review. And that would happen a handful of times every year. I'm going to say I can think of 2 times where there were factual inaccuracies that we corrected. Where and in I think one of those cases, it was a situation of like, oh, you mentioned a tank here, but there was no tank here, and like, okay, all right, it's like it's more of an oversight. It's not like a damning, like, oh, you lied about the game. You know, it's just like, this paragraph is written in a fucked up way, and we can fix it, and we apologize for the confusion, you know, or whatever, right? You have to own it when there is a mistake on your side, like that's part of it, right? There was one situation that I was not a part of because it was on the PC side of things, where they had a freelance reviewer review an MMO, and the review was turned in, and then the company pulled server logs for that account for that character and said, hey, this reviewer only played the game for like 4 hours or some unacceptably low number. And I've told that story before, but it was a situation. It was like, all right, fucking. Okay, we are pulling this review down and doing it from scratch. We are like this. We cannot stand by this review in light of this information. We are no longer using this freelancer for anything ever again, and we are now pulling that review down, and we are going to review it ourselves internally to make sure that it is done properly. And that's a shitty situation. It's a bummer, for sure. But like, you know, if that was something that had happened to someone on staff, if that had been something where like one of our staff reviewers was caught doing that, it might have been their job. That might have been like, hey, you cannot fuck us like this. You cannot expose this business to this. Like, you just fucking need to, like, play the fucking video game, man. Holy shit. You know, like, you know, that might have been too far for someone to survive. But it, you know, it was, since it was a freelancer, it's significantly easier to say like, well, we're not going to use this person ever again. But yeah, I think that this scenario that is being depicted here of like, hey, you have to go to dinner with these Sony reps so that they can complain to you about a thing. I feel like the only scenario in which that is acceptable is if you are going to Ellie Gibson in this case, but if you're going to the editor and saying like, hey, listen, Sony is being fucking crazy about this fucking story. We have already gone down the rabbit hole of like whether we're going to change it or not, but they are still demanding some kind of satisfaction. They feel like they need to complain to your face. I have your back. Like, nothing's going to come of this, but we need to go talk to them. We need to go have this conversation. I think doing it over dinner is like a really fucking shit way to do it too. But if it's a situation where it's like, hey, this relationship is fucking torched. If we go do this, we'll get past it. It'll be whatever. But also, like, I'm not going to, like, I have your fucking back. We'll go here. we'll have this conversation, we'll move on. Like, I think there is some wiggle room there for if the person is senior level enough to where you know that they can handle that, it's not going to fuck up their reporting style for the next 10 years. Then I think that, you know, you could maybe do something like that, but it's a bad situation that you should not be exposed to. But if you're going into it knowing that the stakes are zero, and then you're not going to come out of it fearful for your job or whatever, like, this has already been addressed, we're just going to fucking go and do this. Like, there are some publishers that need their fucking handheld that way sometimes, and relationship management, especially on the previews and like you know, on the preview side of things. In the US, it was the preview side of things, but this sounds like, I'm guessing that this is going to be the United Kingdom where things were a little different. Then you know, I think that there's a pathway where you just like go like, oh yeah, no, okay, yeah, I'll let him complain to me. Like, sometimes you need to let Rockstar complain to you about the Midnight Club review for like an hour on the phone, and all of their complaints are not valid to anything factual, but sometimes they just need to get it out so that they can say to their bosses, yeah, I talked to him. And then they'll be mad about it for 6 months or whatever. And then the next game will come out and everything will be fucking normal again. As normal as that relationship can ever be. But again, in a general sense, we designed things so that I was the person that got those calls. I was the person who took those calls. I never had to go meet with anybody in person about it. It was very much like, yeah, I will happily hop on a call with you and fucking talk to you for an hour about this if you fucking need to get it out. And again, if there's any situation where, like, I'm not being flippant, like if there is a scenario here where we are in the wrong about this, I want to be right. I am not going to ignore valid criticism in these situations. But 99.9% of the time, none of that criticism was valid. It was just them saying like, well, and he says here that the graphics aren't impressive. I think if you look at, I think if you look, and you're like, what the fuck are we even talking about? Jesus Christ. What a fucking colossal waste of time. But they have to get it out, and then they get it out, and you're on the phone going, yeah. No, I mean, well, okay, that's interesting. Okay, I mean, and then, you know, you kind of take some version of those notes and you have a conversation with the reviewer, and you don't necessarily hand them the notes and say, they're saying this. It's, you know, it's not meant to be, you know, any gotcha for anyone involved. It's just like, okay, let's have this conversation. Like, hey, so they have some concerns. I just want to talk through this with you to make sure that we are fucking buttoned up on this. Just, you know, to make sure we're right on this. You know, let's have a conversation about this. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? The graphics, the this, the that. Like, all right. But those are conversations that you probably already had with the reviewer in the process of publishing the review in the first place, because all those reviews came across my desk. All those scores came across my desk. I said things like, hey, the text here makes it sound like you're saying the game is good, but the final score is like a high 8, which is not just good. That's more in great territory. Like, we either need to make the language more positive or bring the score down. Like, this needs to just make a little bit more sense. And so normally the text would be changed to fit the score, but occasionally in discussing it, we would lower a score, we would raise a score. Like, hey, it really makes it, you really sound like you really like the graphics in this game. Like, you're giving it a 7 for graphics. Should this be more like an 8 or 9? Should this be this? Should this, and then it comes down to like, yeah, but like then the final score is like this, and that seems too high. It's like, okay, well, that's what the tilt is for. We can do this. We can raise this up, bring the tilt down 1, boom, done. It was conversations like that. And after we changed the review system to be less about math and more about just like, here's the number, those conversations got a lot shorter and easier to deal with on our end of things. But on the other end of things, publishers, I think, were a little bit less happy with us after we removed the math, because I think the math benefited them in some cases of just like, well, if we have a really shitty game with really great graphics, it's still going to end up some kind of 7. And that stopped happening because reviewers were free to say like, yeah, this game looks great. It's a 6. And, that's kind of how it went. It's such a weirdly specific line of work, man. It's such a fucking strange, it's such a strange thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily like that anymore, because I don't think reviews, review scores, I don't know. They still very much like review scores. They still very much like to tout their, like, we got a Metacritic this, and we got this many 9s, and we got this many this. You still see their, like, accolades trailers, and some publishers still do that kind of thing. So, like, that stuff matters. But the way they manage it now, like, it is much more managed in the terms of, like, who gets the game now, as opposed to, hey, we're going to send out the game to all of these trusted publications, and we're going to hope that we have had the right conversations with them to make them understand why this game is great. And then, I guess we didn't. I guess GameSpot gave it a high 6. I guess okay. Well, all right. But, like, instead, at some point, it became more forward thinking, and, like, hey, I don't know that they like this game. We talked to them in the previews, especially as staffs contracted and you stopped having separate previews and reviews people. You knew, like, oh, this previews person is probably going to be the person that goes on to review the game. We had them out for this event, and they didn't look like they were into it, so I think we're going to not send them the game. And so you have, like, those sorts of scenarios where they try to manage day one review scores around access to the game, which I find, well, look, man, I find it kind of gross, but also I find it totally within their right as a fucking publisher to not send, like, I just look at it and go, like, yeah, I mean, of course you can do that. I think it's gross. I think it's maybe even, you could even call it cowardly in some scenarios, but hey. Also, who's left reviewing games? When I look at, like, Tony Hawk reviews just went up. And, Activision sends me stuff the day it comes out, or like, it'll be out the night before, and they'll send me something in the morning. And it's like, all right, I already bought it because it came out last night, but okay. And normally that's just Call of Duty and whatever else. But I got Tony Hawk yesterday, which is when I asked for it. If I had asked for it a week earlier, maybe I would have gotten it then, but who knows? But you look at, like, who had reviews of Tony Hawk on the day yesterday, and it's usually a bunch of publications that I have no idea who these fucking people are. It's like, all right. Like, who, all right, some of them are just persistent about getting it. Some of them are maybe positive. Who knows, right? You could draw a bunch of weird lines about it if you wanted to, but I think just reviews are the value of reviews. The value of reviews comes from doing a lot of them and establishing a body of work, either as an individual or as a publication, to where people can kind of judge around. Like, if my first review, if I come out of the box and be like, this game's a 9, and you don't know fucking jack shit about me or this or whoever or whatever, then it's not as useful. But also, like, publications change over. Like, the people that are reviewing games at IGN are, I think completely not the same people who were reviewing games there 25 years ago, right? And so a lot of those things change, and a lot of the editorial standards change one way or the other. And, like, people make different calls and whatever else. So I think that, even, what is a 9 at IGN these days? What does it mean? I think it probably means something different than it did all those years ago. It probably means more now. I think that they seem like that they are taking reviews a little bit more seriously than they did back then. At least in, maybe that's just me looking at reviews that they used to write back when we were writing a lot of reviews and just going like, ugh. Was not a big fan of a lot of IGN's work back then when we were directly competing with them. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, I did not much care for the way that they operated in a general sense back in the early 2000s and whatever. It was just like, ugh. Like, all this platform specific, like, coverage and all that weird shit is just super fucking weird. Nirmahan says, I remember Dan Reichert mentioning people complaining to him about Game Informer reviews from the 90s when he was working for them. Yeah. I remember complaining to Dan about Game Informer's review of Enter the Matrix because it was way too fucking high. Because it was like imagining a world where someone came away from that game going, "This is awesome." I was like, no, that's not possible. I remember talking to him about that at some point. I mean, he didn't even review the fucking game. Vinny from New Jersey writes in and says, the Panasonic 3DO has lots of issues, but possibly the most memorable one was its multiple console SKUs with varying performance and prices. The performance was not that. Anyway, the console retail market has been galvanized in generational growth with the occasional mid-gen revision, but has never had a platform with consistent hardware rollout intentions like Xbox now has going forward. Has Microsoft repeated history with hardware market confusion the same way Panasonic did with the 3DO? And is that ultimately the nail in the coffin for any and all first-party hardware manufacturing in-house at Xbox? So what we were talking about, a little bit last week about, the idea of what an Xbox is going forward. I mean, as they get ready to, launch this Xbox Ally thing, I think that, the name Xbox has to mean something completely different if they're going to apply it to all this different stuff. You have an Xbox app on Windows machines. You've got the streaming services that let you play it directly on your TV, and you've got handheld PCs that will, do something. I think that they need to do more than just let you stream games onto it. I think that that's a really bummer of a concept. And it sounds like that they realize that players don't want to just do that. And so they're, maybe going to, my hope would be that they would expand their backwards compatibility offerings in ways that would make a lot of those Xbox Series X games run natively on those devices in some way, or locally on those devices, I guess I should say, not streaming. So the 3DO was a specification. If you were building a 3DO, you were paying licensing fees to the 3DO company, not even Panasonic per se. Panasonic made a 3DO. What, Magnavox made a 3DO? Anyway, a handful of companies made 3DOs. And I do think that, you could draw some similarities there between Gold Star, right? CDI was the same deal. Different manufacturers made CDI hardware. It was just a specification, but it was a specification with licensing fees. And so if you wanted to make something to that specification, because it was still technically a closed system, you still had to license that from the license holders. You could envision a scenario where, the Xbox brand becomes something like that. Right. And we talked about this a little bit, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. But yeah, I do think that this does, the likely outcome here is that we end up in a scenario where the Xbox name is applied. I mean, they're trying to apply it to a VR headset of all things, and there are no VR native Xbox games. It's just you can stream Xbox games in VR if you want to do that. They're being very fast and loose with this terminology, and I think that there could be some confusion around that, but I do think that, they're going to end up looking to sell these, these things will also probably end up costing more money in a lot of cases. This handheld PC is not going to be cheap, I assume. So yeah, I think that you could see some confusion around that. I think you'll see confusion when you have multiple companies making an Xbox, especially if there are differences between them in specifications, and you have to figure out what's the good Xbox? I want to get the best Xbox I can get. There used to only be one, and then suddenly there were two, and the difference was hard drive size. And then suddenly there were two, and one was less powerful than the other. And then suddenly there was also one that didn't have a drive on, a disk drive on it at all, but it had more internal storage space, and it was still the most powerful one, and it was white. And then past that, you're going to get to a point where it's here's the Xbox that Asus is making. Here's the Xbox that Facebook put out. Here's the Xbox, like I think that those are, they will, if this is the route that they're going to go, they will have to come up with some additional terminology on this that helps consumers figure out what the fuck they're buying. And that will be, how well they do at that is how you kind of help solve that kind of confusion and whatever else, right? So, but the other time you'll run into this is at the turn of a generation, when they're trying to level up these things and be like, okay, now there's a way more powerful Xbox out. What does that mean? We see iPhones go through this all the time, where it's like, oh, only, up to this iPhone can install the latest OS. These other ones are now kind of out of vogue. These ones are no longer getting updates. And so older apps run on these fine, but newer ones won't run at all or whatever. And that's becoming a thing on phones, over the years. I don't know how you address it on a game console. I don't know how you address that going forward, unless you get to a point where you're basically rebuilding, like I've said, the MPC spec from the 90s of like, oh, if you have or the Windows Vista experience number or some kind of standardized numbering scheme that lets you know that you're buying a more powerful Xbox than the one you already have or whatever, right? I think that ends up being weird. And that is something they if that's the road they're going to go down, they will have to address it, and they are. Bariki once says console gaming shouldn't be confusing. You're right, but also they're not necessarily sticking to console gaming. Like, they are going to try to have it both ways. They're going to try to hybridize this thing in a sense and call a lot of things Xboxes and whatever else and try to make it happen. And I think that there is a road that they can take that I think will make that work, but the caveats on it, I do think are like, there are limiting factors around price. Like, if you're suddenly letting anyone make a thing and slap the Xbox name on it and they're all Windows machines and the Xbox storefront is given premium placement, unless you're in the EU, who knows what'll happen when they ship those things there. Then, they'll still get their fees for things that are sold in the Xbox storefront the same way they do today. But if you just buy one of those things and install Steam on it and never buy an Xbox game and don't subscribe to Game Pass or whatever, like, they're not going to sell those things at a loss, right? So presumably all of these things end up being like a bump up in price from where the consoles were previously, which, with all the tariffs and everything else, is already kind of happening in weird ways. You're potentially giving up on some of the ongoing subscription service fees that you've been getting and you've been loving for years, right? This is all writing on the wall stuff that I think was going to happen one way or the other eventually. And it's why they kind of re-engineered a lot of the Game Pass and Xbox Live Gold offerings to, in theory, they're simplifying it, but in practice at the time, it felt like a dramatic change of like, I don't know what the fuck you guys are selling anymore. But technically, you still need to have something like that if you want to play games online, which the minute you're selling Windows PCs, I don't think is a thing that they can get away with. If they want to compete with the other storefronts that can run on their own box, of course, like you can't say, oh, if you bought this game through the Xbox store, then you have to buy a Game Pass subscription to get online access. People will just say, oh, I'm just going to install the Steam store and not do that. Like, why would I do that? But we'll see how it all comes out. I don't think any of this stuff is quite set in stone. I'm just kind of looking at the stuff that they have said so far about what they want to do with the next generation of hardware. And I look at the stuff that I just kind of where they're at, where the console business seems to be at, and trying to figure out where it's all going to go. I think Microsoft has a lot of unique forces pulling on it and pushing on it from the, you know, the parent company AI garbage. But that's not all. That's not their only problem, and you know, and this isn't a road that they necessarily would have gone down. I think if the Xbox hardware had been more successful than it was, and if Xbox third-party software had been selling better, and all of this stuff, there was another story going around saying that like you know, physical sales of like Final Fantasy 16 or whatever on Xbox were really low. Some you know, retail tracking service was trying to say like, they sold 22,000 copies. The number, who knows? I find it very easy to believe that Final Fantasy on the Xbox did not sell like gangbusters, because if you are a Final Fantasy fan, A, you probably didn't buy an Xbox in the first place, and B, you probably don't only own an Xbox, and so you probably found a way. If you really like Final Fantasy, you probably played it somewhere else already. Especially if we're talking about a retail version of a game and not a game, you know, Game Pass type thing or whatever. You probably played that game somewhere already, you know? And so I don't know. Like people try to tout those numbers out there and go, look at this, it's great. And you're like, yeah, well, no shit. No shit, right? Anyone who really cares about this franchise played it already. It's years old. That matters. At the end of the day, that matters. But And Mark sends in a similar question here. If the next Xbox can run other storefronts, doesn't that mean it won't be as heavily subsidized by game sales, since Microsoft won't get a cut from something sold through Steam? Do you think this could mean the system could cost a lot more? Maybe, yeah. I think everything will cost a lot more no matter what, because of just where we're at economically, right? But yeah, I think if they're selling a box and they if they put this thing out there, if they start putting these things out there and find, oh shit, no one is using our storefront, even though we tried to give it, presumably they will try to give it some kind of prominent auto launch placement of like, oh, it's going to launch to the Xbox storefront. The whole OS front end is now the Xbox app, or God, hopefully something better than that. But you know what I mean? Like here's a front end where you launch games and buy games and download games, and it's all right there. The same way Steam Big Picture is, the same way Steam OS is, but it's still Windows underneath it, and you can kind of do whatever with it because it's got the freedom of Windows. Then yeah, I do think that gets a little weird. But also, I don't think that necessarily means it's the wrong move. But you know, maybe I'm kind of underestimating the current success or the current performance of Xbox in the marketplace. But I kind of look at it as like, yeah, this is kind of, when you look at what the complaints have looked like for third-party sales and what some of the other things around the edges of the Xbox business have looked like for a long time, just in terms of the way people talk about it, the way people talk about what success looks like on that platform, or lack thereof. You start to see a scenario where you're like, oh yeah, I guess, you know, like they kind of have to pivot to PC because Jesus. And also pivoting to PC probably gives them, you know, more inroads in the AI side of the business, and maybe that helps them in their own way too. I can only really speculate at the end of the day. I feel like with what they've said already publicly about their direction and stuff, that's the way I connect these dots. Is this seems like the road they're going down. I would be very shocked if they came up with a half-step solution, and maybe they will. Maybe they'll try to have it both ways, and maybe they'll fuck this whole thing up. Of like, okay, yeah, it's got the freedom of Windows, you know, within reason. I mean, let's not be crazy here. We're not gonna, you know, like, yeah, this partner device, this Xbox Ally, yeah, that thing you can install Steam on or whatever, but when it comes time for us to sell you a real Xbox, that's still going to be closed. That to me sounds like a death sentence. That to me sounds like something that people have already said they don't want from Xbox long term. And so it's kind of hard for me to, you know, see that as a smart way forward for them. But in a world where maybe the numbers are not super dire on that stuff, and you know, maybe I'm in a world where maybe people are exaggerating that a little bit, yeah, maybe they do see a way that they can kind of have it both ways on that, and try to have some kind of closed system where they keep all the money, or they keep all the sales money, their cut. None of it goes to Steam. None of it goes here. None of it goes there. I think that's way less interesting. I think if they are just kind of going with this everything's an Xbox strategy, and they don't do further backwards compatibility work to make your library run on Windows so that it can run on all these other machines in a non-cloud streaming capacity, then they're just selling things that are probably going to run Steam really well. Like I don't really see what the, if they don't do it all the way, if they don't pivot the entire platform and rebuild it around this concept, then I don't see either end of it succeeding. I think they, much like Mike Ybarra was saying, they need to pick a lane. But I think they need to go all the way one way or all the way the other. And I don't think this, I think the way they're out there saying, this is an Xbox, everything is an Xbox. I think, and the way they bring up Windows as they talk about what the next steps from them look like into the next generation, I look at that as there are very few ways to read that don't also include all of their devices being open. We'll see. We will see. Jake from Texas wants to know. He says, I was wondering what it was like covering the Sega Saturn in the 90s. Was Sega easier or harder to work with given how much of a failure it was? Are there any games you still want to see rescued from it? I've never played Burning Rangers, but hope to someday, given how much of a banger its theme song is. So, in the early days of this, Sega was very much in transition, right? Like when they transitioned out of the Genesis, out of the Sega CD, and you had like the 32X and then the Saturn right around the corner. At the time, I had been covering, I had been around games, and Sega was actually the company I had been around most of all because they were local, and Nintendo was up in Seattle, and so, and TurboGrafx was in LA, I think, TTI, but yeah, the early days of Saturn were kind of weird because you could tell that Sega was in some kind of disarray. Like they had just spent a bunch of time promoting Sega CD games that no one really wanted, and the 32X came out, and you were like, this isn't... Like, I like some games on the 32X. I love some games on the Sega CD, but like it felt like that they had the massive success of the Genesis. They had their moment where they were really taking it to Nintendo, and they were looking like market leaders. And a lot of it was because of things that Sega was doing in the US. A lot of the things that Tom Kalinske and the team there, they just had figured out marketing in the 90s in a way that, no one else quite had. And they figured out great ways to market the Genesis to, a growing, aging teen audience. And then they lost it. The Sega CD wasn't cool. The 32X, like the story on 32X wasn't strong enough at launch. They were like, hey, here's another version of, you can play Virtua Fighter on you play Star Wars Arcade. Everyone loves that game. And you're like, yeah, everyone loves that game for 40 minutes. And then they finish it and they go, okay, what's next? And so the 32X was like a really hard sell in a lot of ways. And so to have like right around the corner, not only be like, hey, Saturn is coming, to then suddenly go to E3 and have them say, fuck it, Saturn is out. Sega was a mess. Dealing with them was never difficult. They were not hard to work with. They were sometimes, Sega got beleaguered at a certain point. Sega got beaten down. And a lot of that is, because Nintendo figured a few things out. Nintendo launched a 16-bit system that everyone in the world wanted immediately because it was fantastic. And Sega of Japan was knocking on Sega of America's door immediately and going like, hey, Not quite as popular over there as you used to be, huh? I guess that means now we can start winning more and more arguments with you guys about what to do in the US. And they, the Saturn came out when it did, and their strategy became the strategy. And a lot of that Sega US team, I think, got fucking browbeaten. They just got beaten down. And, there was turnover. There were people that left, in that era for sure, because they were just fucking sick of it. They were sick of fighting Japan. They were sick of fucking the market turning on them, they didn't have great games. They didn't have great fucking software. Like the Sega CD. It's very easy to look back on the Sega CD now and go, look at this thing. It's very interesting. It's very intriguing. And there's some very interesting software on it. In real time, though, the Sega CD seemed like fucking terrible. In real time, it was like a hilarious gimmick of just like, I can't believe this Night Trap game. Look at this sewer shark. What the fuck, man? And so it just kind of, a lot of the luster tumbled off of the Sega brand like overnight. And so by the time even 32X was coming out, it felt like, what the are we still doing this? We're still fucking plugging weird shit into a Genesis? The fuck are we doing? You could tell that they were struggling. You could tell that they were like, especially by the time the Saturn launched, because at that point, everyone was already excited about the PlayStation. By the time the Saturn actually hit stores, the PlayStation was out in some territory, it was just a very different environment overnight, because the minute you saw Ridge Racer and Toshinden of all things, but the minute you saw those games running on a PlayStation, it became apparent that you were going to need to own a PlayStation. It was not a 3DO scenario where some consumer electronics company is stumbling into the market and they have no idea what they're doing and they're making a bunch of garbage. It's not like the CDI where they're like, you can watch Forrest Gump on this thing. The PlayStation was a motherfucking game machine. The PlayStation was, and some number of people that helped launch to the PlayStation were people that got out of Sega because it was fucking, because it sucked to work there overnight. And so you had some of those folks going over there and doing quite well with the PlayStation 1. And so the people at Sega were always very like pretty easy to deal with, I would say. And they had great people, I think near the end of I'm trying to think when the transition was. But like in the Dreamcast era, Sega had fantastic people in their PR department. They were awesome. They were fucking great. Just cool. Just easy to fucking hang out with, easy to be around. Like just normal fucking people. You could get games from them. There was no weird shadow game. You didn't have to fucking play weird games to get stuff from them. It was like, hey, I'm looking to do something with this. Okay, cool. If they had it, they would send it. That was that. Through Saturn, there were definitely times where it was like tougher than others, and because they were, like I said, there were transitions and there were things like but I don't know that I ever got like any kind of hard luck or hard feelings out of them. When they were like, oh, we're putting out Quake and it works with a modem, isn't that cool? And you're like, no, it's super not. Like, I don't know. I guess in some weird way that's cool. Like, it's more weird than cool, but okay. They didn't have a lot to work with, and I think they generally realized that in a lot of especially the later days of the Saturn, where it just got weird, pre-Dreamcast and all that. But yeah, there's there was just a lot of questionable decisions being made at Sega very rapidly through that whole era. The early launch of the Saturn, whatever. There's full on documentaries about this. That I think are mostly accurate. They're not, there's having been there for some of that stuff and having known some of those people that they are talking about. It's never quite as simple as some of the documentaries kind of boil it down to, but for the most part, those are quite good. But yeah, the Saturn covering the Saturn in the 90s, the most abrasive part about covering the Saturn in the 90s were the people who still identified as like diehard Sega fans. Because those were the people who were just like, this game's just as good on the PlayStation version is not better. And you're like, no, believe me, I've run them both side by side. I've literally had both of them running side by side to look at them. I can tell you, like, the PlayStation version is fucking better. Like, you're wrong. But you had a lot of people who just, like, were still big Sega fans. This would last through the Dreamcast as well. And I've said it before, like, those people specifically were the worst fanboys to deal with. The Sega fanboys were the most, like, borderline violent. They most resemble modern gamers, if you will. The kind of Saturn Dreamcast era Sega fanboys, where like the market is just like eroding underneath Sega's feet, and they're sitting there going, no, this is still the best system on the market. The Saturn is the best. And you're like, okay, you're wrong, but okay. I mean, fine. It's fine. But like they were the ones writing in with the most of like violent ideation and like, I can't believe these reviewers need to be shot in the head, like all that fucking shit. Like they were the ones that were doing the most of that. Which it was fucking stupid. But I don't know. Like fanboying out for a console was always stupid. So I don't know. I loved the Sega Genesis, man. I still do. It's a crazy library. It's a whole crazy cool thing. But yeah, they lost their way and they never really found it again. Even the Dreamcast. I think like as much as people try to say like, oh, the Dreamcast was going to be this if big bad Sony hadn't done this. Like, yeah, I don't know. They lost in a marketplace because they didn't have the goods. Like, period, man. Like, yeah, was there some marketing and stuff that probably hurt their chances? Yeah, but like the PlayStation 1 was so good that people were like, fuck a Dreamcast, I'm waiting for a PS2. I think that's kind of crazy. Personally, I think there were enough good games on the Dreamcast to justify owning one by a much wider margin than the Saturn ever had. But I think that a lot of the Dreamcast story was written before it even shipped. The winter when it was out in Japan, you saw a lot of that stuff. Like there was great games at the launch, and there were amazing video games over the course of the Dreamcast history, and landmark moments from some amazing developers, just like people that you wish were still making games more regularly than they do. But like I think once you saw the way Sony was positioning the PlayStation 2 and some of the demos they were showing, and some of that was a little smoke and mirrors, because remember the early days of PS2, the pre-release hype around PS2 was them saying like Pixar quality graphics and like some of this really cornball shit that if you just ate it up hook, line, and sinker, you were dumb in some different ways. But at the same time, like Sega didn't have EA's sports games, and for as much as people loved the NFL 2K series on Dreamcast and NBA as well, like there were still people who were so loyal and dedicated to Madden that was enough for them to go, I'm going to wait for PS2. I'm going to wait for PlayStation. I'm waiting for the next Madden to come out. And again, I think that is crazy, because goddamn, dude, especially in that era. I mean, I'm no football expert, but holy shit, the NFL 2K games were so much more playable and exciting and enjoyable than Madden was in that era. That the people that tried to, the people that convinced themselves that like, oh, that's fuck those, I'm waiting for the real football game, I'm waiting for John Madden. Like, they missed out, man. They fucking missed out. But like the Dreamcast, I think in a lot of ways, it had a better shot than the Saturn did. When the Saturn came out, it was pretty easy to just look at it and go like, dude, you guys are fucked. Like, what am I gotta play Scud? We're over here playing Scud, talking about the future of the Sega Saturn? Come on. Um, the Dreamcast didn't feel like that. The Dreamcast felt like, oh, you know, maybe there's a way that they pull through on this, and there's some really cool stuff. And man, Soul Calibur, this is an incredible fucking version of this video game, and blah blah blah. But at the same time, maybe it's when it's shipped, and you know, its positioning between the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 and whatever else. But like there was just sort of a feeling of like, the Dreamcast is going to be a really cool stopgap here on our way to the PlayStation 2. Third-party support was always a little weird, and you know, and Sega's first-party stuff was oftentimes amazing, but like it just kind of wasn't. It never felt like it was enough. Your weirdo friends who were really it was you know what, a lot of it was the difference between people who were super into video games and people who were very mainstream about it. That was becoming more of a thing, and I think the Madden talk kind of ties into that, of people going like, I'm waiting for the next Madden, I'm getting a PlayStation. Like those were people who didn't really care about video games that much, but those were the people that, you know, made the install bases massive over the course of a generation, right? Whereas like the people of the Dreamcast, they were the people who, you know, valued video games, and they were the people who were just like, fuck it, I need all of this stuff. I need to get everything. And you know, they were having a great time playing some fucking of the greatest games ever made in some cases. Eventually you have to import them. The other thing you run into there is, you know, by having a console that probably appeals to a slightly savvier audience, a slightly more tech savvy audience, when you have a console like the Dreamcast where piracy becomes the easiest thing in the world to do, you have an audience that knows how to do it, because a lot of them are, again, a little more in the know, a little more tech savvy, a little more like, oh yeah, I can install this copy of Disc Juggalo and burn some discs or whatever, you know. Like it wasn't, you know, like that probably played some percentage of a role. Like it's not the death knell or anything like that, but it's that it's sort of like, you know, when you make that smaller thing that appeals to a smarter audience, they're going to be smarter in a lot of ways you didn't anticipate. Like they're going to be smart enough to run ad blockers on your website, and you're going to go, oh, this thing's never going to make a dime on ads because 80% of our users are using ad blockers. And you look at that and go like, damn right they are. That's because they're not fucking idiots. That's awesome. Also, oh shit. You know? But I digress. Last question. Ryan from Texas writes in, asking about fruit in video games. I was just watching an old video reviewing the NES mini console. You guys were playing Bubble Bobble and collected fruit for points. Why did we land on fruit as the general point pickup? Was this just an effect from Pac-Man, or did it start from somewhere else? I think a lot of that came from Pac-Man, or you know, like, yeah, slot machines had a lot of fruit in them. Fruit is also a real thing that's good. And you could argue that eating fruit in real life gives you some kind of points, anti-scurvy points or something. You know, like fruit is cool. My favorite fruit is the boss ship from Galaxian. That's the most delicious fruit. They eventually made another version of Pac-Man called Pac-Man Plus that changed up some variety of things about the game's graphics, including replacing one of the fruits with a can of Coke. So, you know, got to try to get people drinking them sodas. But yeah, I don't know. I wonder, you know, fruit is cool. Pretzel, you know, Miss Pac-Man introduced us to the pretzels. I had never seen a pretzel before that moment. That's not true. But, you know, they had some other snacks in there. And the highest point item in Pac-Man to collect is a key, which is not a fruit. So even their fruit bonuses are not always fruit. I do think it's recognizable. Yeah, that's definitely like there's an aspect of that of like, if you are drawing things in pixels in an 80s arcade game, it is easy to make identifiable cherries and strawberries. It's these big bright colors. It's very easy to chase after and get. You know, if you're looking at like a bunch of dirt and there are cherries in the dirt, the cherries really pop out of that dirt and you can get it. Yeah, Narrowkip is a good idea. Easy to understand. That's not a bad thing to pick up. Yeah. I think people understand that fruit is good. And so, you know, you can look at it and go, oh, fruit. I should get the fruit, right? Because fruit is good. Why would I not get the fruit? Why would I not get these keys? I think that makes a case for why the Galaxian boss ship is a very strange item to put into Pac-Man. But hey, cross-marketing, whatever. That's going to do it for us here. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this week's edition of the show. Probably tomorrow, we're going to play some of this Tony Hawk. Come on back through for Wednesday. We'll hang out. We'll talk. We'll play some Tony Hawk. And then Friday will be episode 100 of the ongoing endeavor to rank every 8-bit Nintendo game. That's very crazy. Tomorrow, I have to check with my wife. I won't know until later, but I think I might be starting early and ending a little early tomorrow because I got to pick up my daughter. And the timing works out. So I might be with you slightly earlier than the normal time tomorrow, and so on. But yes, come on back through. We'll check some stuff out. Of course, there's the Patreon over at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. Sign on up. You get an ad-free version of this very podcast, as well as a bonus podcast and more. So do check that out. Thanks, everybody, for supporting the broadcast. And I will be back tomorrow with more stuff. And, of course, next Tuesday with another episode of this frickin' podcast.